breeding scheme, training on boer goat keeping and farming management. Goat farming is a viable enterprise, and farmers in the Zambezi region can prosper relying on their indigenous environment, particularly the smallholder indigenous goat farmers. Most farmers are adverse to goat farming due to several challenges. However, through this project, not only will a boer goat breeding scheme be established, but also help capacitate local farmers on boer goat keeping. To date, training for 30 farmers on boer goat keeping has occurred, as well as employment creation. The association has lowered costs to buyers due to supply of boer goats in the community, increased market value of livestock due to improved quality, and strengthened livestock to improve the quality of beef.
We are at Gunkwe Association Farm, where our association is, or our project is allocated. Our project is all about goat breeding or boer goat breeding. From NEARED project, we received the amount of 55,000, where we managed to do our crow and buy certain goats. Our idea for applying for assistance is, we thought the project, we are not going to manage it alone, because it most consists with members who are not working, members who are looking for a job. So we thought of applying for assistance so we can manage our project. The beneficiary we are looking of, in our community we have vulnerable people who are poor, who cannot manage anything or for their livelihood. We have orphans who doesn't have parents. We have women who are leading the household. So those are most our beneficiary people that we are looking at. On this project, since as you can see, it's a very good project. As we looked and analyzed on it, one of the reasons we came up with it, because the goats doesn't have problem, or they are easy to manage, and they give offspring or breeds a lot. In a year, you can have more than twice or three double. So with the community, we can all benefit together as we provide with our beneficiary or with people who are vulnerable within our communities. We can help in combat poverty. As you can look at it, we did not debauch that much. As we know, we need tree for the oxygen, and our animal also need oxygen. So we don't cut trees a lot. We just clean there where the goats are, and just the provision of the way coming in and coming out from the project. I would like to thank the EIF for the assistance that they showed up. With us, ordinary members, I don't think we could manage. We are not yet complete with the project, but we thank them for their assistance.
This documentary broadcast was brought to you by the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia. This documentary broadcast is brought to you by the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia. The United Nations Development Programme, together with the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade and their partners, the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia and Standard Bank Namibia, launched the Sustainable Development Goals Impact Facility on Monday, the 2nd of November 2020. The SDGIF will be used to provide mentorship grants and debt financing to women and youth in business, social enterprises, and micro, small, and medium enterprises. Fulfilling the promise of the UN Sustainable Development Goals requires multi-sectoral approaches that bring together expertise from a range of perspectives.
The SDGIF, which is the short form for the Sustainable Development Goals Investment Facility, So it was deliberately titled like that because the idea was to put together a financing platform or financing vehicle and this facility was targeted at micro, small, medium enterprises or MSMEs who are working in these areas in terms of creating employment, even doing their entrepreneurship in the areas of sustainable development goals.
So the Sustainable Development Impact Facility, or the SDGIF, is a women and youth-based match grant facility. The facility is a partnership between the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade, the UNDP, Standard Bank Namibia, and the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia. The facility funded businesses across 3 windows.
Definitely, there's need for funding for SMEs, for women, for the youth, for the unemployed. A lot of people are thinking of going into the sector and try to make ends meet. We looked at businesses that were feasible and that would see that if we do fund it, there is a future for the business, and with the funds they wouldn't just be stagnant but would be able to empower and continue.
Majority of beneficiaries are women and 66% youth. The leading economic sector that received the most grant applications under Window 1 came from the artisan sector, followed by agriculture. These funds were dispersed across the following regions: Khomas, Oshana, Irongo, Ochothonjupa, Qaras, Zambezi, and Kavango West.
Currently, we are manufacturing, marketing, and also distributing the Mutete hibiscus juice, which is a local organic juice made in Namibia with local ingredients.
We're actually at Mbut camp right now, and we actually started building this camp about 2 years back, just in 2020. And actually, when we started, there was nothing here. It was completely nothing, and we just came up here.
So Miyombo is a sawmill. The sawmill is also known as a timber processing company. So what we do here as phase 1, the company actually has 3 phases. We're in phase 1. We saw, as you see next to me, blocks. We saw those into planks. And we've got different machines that do that. We've got 3 types of machines because we want to make a perpendicular and parallel plank so that when the carpenters receive them, they've got a perfect product. And we got funding from the EIF and the project to be able to start phase 1 or to grow into phase 1. Yeah.
No, we are a long-standing partner for Namibia, the government and the people of Namibia. We've been here since independence. Since before independence, we've actually been supported. And as I said, our mandate is to work with the people and the government, to support the priorities, the national priorities. And we will continue to work with them. We are not donors, but we are development partners. We try and get whatever resources we can to support the country, but we work alongside the government and the people. So their priorities are our priorities. So within our own comparative advantage and technical capacities, we support them.
This documentary broadcast was brought to you by the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia.
Under the Improving Rangeland and Ecosystem Management project, locals have benefited greatly. At Oshokavare, entrepreneur Lucrecia Kapeshire Shinjo was a lucky recipient of an energy-efficient stove. As some of you might wonder what this has to do with rangeland or ecosystem, the reality is that because of disparities in livelihoods, some people tend to rely heavily on natural resources, and the sustainability of utilization of these resources is sometimes endangered. The energy-efficient stove is designed to simply use less wood and produce more heat. How exactly does that happen? Shivute Nangula of the EIF explains.
The project actually procured 300 energy or fuel-efficient stoves that were distributed among beneficiaries or local communities here in the Kunene region. The purpose of this is actually we all know that our forest systems actually face various pressures when it comes to the utilization of wood resources. So the idea here was to actually come up with an innovative idea or innovative structure that can actually assist our local communities. This energy or fuel efficient stove can actually do three things at the same time. This stove can cook, you can cook with it. You can actually also be baking bread, yes, bread here underneath, and at the same time you can also be braising. The most other important thing that the stove can do is also it can boil water, so you can do all those things, 3 or 4 things at the same time using little wood, knowing that our forest resources are getting depleted, and we really need to consider the utilization of wood resources when it comes to if we really want to actually keep pressure or reduce pressure from our forest resources. Boiling water, here on top, as you can see, there's an inlet here. So you pour water here, it can take about 25 or more than 25 or 30 liters of water. So you pour the water in here, and while you are busy cooking or while you are busy baking or braising, the water can actually be warmed up with a little wood that you have put in the stove. And when you see here on the side, it's a tap. So once the water is boiled and you want to use water either to wash pots or to wash plates and so forth, you can always open the tap here and yes, and wash your hands. Yes. So you can see it's warm water. We just finished using the stove now.
The user of the stove, Shinjo, says it has been beneficial to her.
Nakuja mbitwa modongo ne pro mishito makara ngombe mokotezu konchi idika na wa uriri bipito mbili oni mbiene noku okufamo makara.
Welcome back. Good afternoon. Shoo. This usually, I don't know, it works every time that when you feed, after the food, it's like everybody's going into hibernation. So my first request, please, is please don't fall asleep. You can see the venue is a little bit brighter than when you left it. It's deliberate. So there are some comrades I'm seeing here in the room, your George Kambalas, your Ngari Shiembas, our CEO from ECB. You know, us big gentlemen must be guarded closely after we have eaten. So we must make sure that nobody falls asleep in the room. But nonetheless, we have 2 very important sessions that are coming up as we're closing. I know, of course, especially the board member from EAA, and I know he's waiting for the finance architecture session, but we've deliberately left that one for last. But first, we are starting with, I think, what the whole world needs right now. We know, of course, that the conversation around global decarbonization has been taking center stage. And as Namibia, we are very lucky to be one of those countries that are front-leaping and leapfrogging the introduction of green hydrogen and, of course, also dealing with global decarbonization down the line. But I think for many people, the good thing is that the Green Hydrogen Commission has always been available to have these conversations. I know, of course, there's still much that needs to be done in terms of understanding the science behind it and when exactly Namibians are going to start making money from it. Yesterday, Hyphen launched their socio-economic development framework, where they're looking at the employment for these 13,000 Namibians and how small and medium enterprises can, of course, also benefit from support services. We are looking at over $7 billion, and I think the Commissioner will correct me when it comes on the platform in terms of what sort of opportunities are available. But it's quite a lot, and it's important for us that whenever there is a space and a chance for us to have that conversation, that we do. Because in the larger scheme of things, of course, global decarbonization and green hydrogen go hand in hand with sustainable development goals of our country. But for now, let me introduce the moderator for the next session. He will, of course, introduce his speakers as well as the panel discussion. Just a reminder, please, if you have any questions, post them on our Facebook pages. We will collect all that information and include it at the report that will be provided at the end of the conference. So it's important to hear those views on the way forward. If you want to send an email to one of the colleagues, please do that. If you want to send some comments on the social media platforms, please do that, as long as we have feedback from you on some of those important and salient points. We don't want to miss anything for today. But the session is not mine. Let me hand over to the owner of the session. I think he's probably the second most famous guy in the room besides me. Please make a noise and a round of applause for Mr. Denver Kisting.
Ladies and gentlemen, first things first, I think that gentleman deserves a resounding round of applause. I think we would all concur that he's been doing such a sterling job. Thank you so much, Ricardo. Note very well, I'm referring to him as Ricardo, not because I don't grasp the scope, gravity, and magnitude of the work that he's doing. But there's a public prohibition instituted by him sometime during the course of the start of this year that I may not say his surname in a public space unless I've rehearsed for a couple of days. So we are all in a race against time in 2023, so I was unable to rehearse, and therefore I shall not say, mention, share his surname in a public space. The consequences could be very serious. They could be very dire. I am not prepared. I cannot afford to run that risk. But thank you very much, sir. My name is Denver Kisting, and in fact, I'd like to state that I intermittently respond to the name Denver Kisting. You may very rightfully wonder, what on earth is this man on about? I'm stealing the following from a colleague when she claimed not too long ago that at that moment her name was XYZ. And I asked her, what on earth does that mean? Do you go by a different name under other circumstances? Of course, she said. You know how quick these millennials are to respond. Of course, she said. So that is the name within an official setting, a very professional space, as per the guidelines of the Ministry of Home Affairs, Immigration, Safety and Security. She says at home, she goes by a completely different name. And moreover, on the streets, and you know these streets of Windhoek are of a particular nature, she also goes by a completely different name. Because we had found ourselves in what was supposed to be a family-friendly space, I was unable to inquire what those two other versions of her name was. So we left it at that. Be that as it may, Mr. Libanda, I want to remind us about why we're finding ourselves in this room at this moment. On a platform on national television known as Talk of the Nation, Mr. Libanda, Chief Executive Officer of the Environmental Investment Fund, put it so eloquently last night. The purpose is twofold. One, the EIF wants to engage all stakeholders across the board about their sentiments regarding where we are at. Of course, about climate change, but certainly about climate change financing. The other very important undertaking made by Mr. Libanda on national television is that the EIF commits to providing us with a framework, a roadmap on what the next steps ought to be in order for us to accomplish these very noble, very serious, but very challenging and very daunting goals. He equally acknowledged that yes, we've made significant strides, but there remains ample room for growth and improvement. And there is a gap between how much we need in terms of financing, how much we have in the kitty, and what needs to happen in between to close that gap. It's not the responsibility of government only. It's not the responsibility of the private sector only. It's everyone's responsibility, and we are all important, and we all play a role to fulfill those goals. I did want to share with you earlier that it is my understanding that a commission of inquiry is already underway. And the prime suspects go by the name of Ricardo, whose surname I shall not pronounce publicly. as well as Mr. Benedict Libanda. I suspect, and that's a complaint that I lodged against the two of them, that there must be a personal vendetta. Therefore, they chose for me to moderate the session that follows lunch. What we do know is, and he already mentioned it, some of you are not here, you are elsewhere. You may have booked yourself a room in this very Mercure hotel, you may have gone home, or you may be fast asleep. By a show of hands, who's not awake? Thank you very much, Madam Maruda, for that honesty and transparency and accountability. This is the last chance before we get going. Who is not awake, please, by a show of hands? Very well. What we do know is, and if we don't yet, we may have a bit of a problem. The past 2 years, the past 2.5 years, taught us how critically important collaboration is, how critically important cooperation is. We can no longer be armchair critics and just criticize what is being done. People sacrificing very precious family time in order to serve this nation and her future. We need to get our hands dirty, we need to participate, we need to get involved. So during this session, we'll unpack what is it that still needs to happen in terms of collaboration, particularly with the goal in mind that we want to ensure that the land of the brave becomes Africa's energy hub. Without any further ado, a gentleman whose name, as per the Ministry of Home Affairs, Immigration, Safety and Security, should certainly be changed. He should no longer be called James Nupe. He should be called James Green Hydrogen Nupe. He is not only the Presidential Economic Advisor, but he also is the country's Green Hydrogen Commissioner. Ladies and gentlemen, not only is this man one of the most eloquent people you'll ever come across in your lifetime, number one, but he's really committed to the cause. He's really doing the heavy lifting. He's really sacrificing precious family time to serve you and me. Let's please put our hands together for a brief curtain raiser for Mr. James Nupe.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being awake. I'm still waiting for my passport to be updated to reflect the new name, but for now, at least you all know it, and hopefully you'll let me through at immigration. So I've got 6 minutes to try and talk a little bit about why green hydrogen and what we're trying to do with green hydrogen is a little bit more than just the production of the molecule. And I think this particular slide is apt, right? So why is Namibia actually trying to champion, because really what we're trying to do is to incubate a new industry in Namibia. We're trying to incubate a synthetic fuels industry actually in Namibia. And I think one of the simplest ways to explain it is when you consider this speech that the president delivered in September 2020 at the United Nations General Assembly. Essentially, he delivered this speech about 6 months before we launched HPP2. And his ambition in this speech says that the president, of course, working with the government and all of the Namibian citizens, had an ambition to transform the Namibian economy, right? The Namibian economy is primarily dependent on the primary sector. We dig up things from the ground and we sell them, whether it's uranium, gold, diamonds, etc. We don't manufacture too many things. That's a secondary sector. And certainly we don't necessarily provide a lot of services that we sell. And so when the president talks about transforming the economic structure, he wanted us to start moving up the complexity value chain, if you want to think about it, from an economic complexity perspective. The second thing he mentions in that paragraph is that we wanted to access innovative financial tools. He mentions things like green bonds, blue bonds, carbon credits. And you'll notice that a lot of those innovative financial tools help us get cheap funding, concessionary funding, things that the EIF, deals with on a daily basis. This concessionary funding, this cheap funding, is useful to build assets that are going to help with combating climate change and reducing carbon content of various goods, of the economy in general. Okay, so now you're beginning to get a hint of why green hydrogen would be important, because hydrogen is commonly used today in various industries. The only reason it's green is because it's made from renewable energy and therefore helps to combat climate change. And if we pursued that, we're likely going to be able to unlock some of these green financial tools. And why was that important? We all know that Namibia already had quite a bit of debt. And so if we were going to attract capital, we wanted to attract cheap capital that was not going to increase our burden from a fiscal perspective. The last thing that he mentions, which is very important, is that he does want to inspire Namibians to start focusing on R&D, right? African-led research and development is what he was talking about. So one of the first things we did when we launched this whole green hydrogen agenda is we went straight to the universities and we asked them to form a national green hydrogen research institute. And today, you know, whether it's NAST or UNAM, a lot of them are actually putting together curricula that are helping to train Namibians to understand the science behind this whole green hydrogen story. So at least now you're understanding what the bigger picture was from the president and how that ended up in HPP2. And now I'm going to use this simple diagram to start explaining how those words start to come together in what we had called in HPP2 the Southern Corridor Development Initiative, right? In this particular diagram, what you do see is you see some wind turbines and some solar panels there in the middle, and that is the renewable energy that Lüderitz really brings to the table. We can capture that wind and sun and use that electricity, and we transport it back to Lüderitz to that factory, and in that factory, we can then split water into its two components, hydrogen and oxygen. If you want to think about it very simply, you can shock the water and then get your hydrogen separately. You combine that hydrogen with nitrogen to make ammonia. Why? Because ammonia as a product, liquid ammonia, is a lot easier to trade. Because whatever natural resources you have, you still need to make it into a product that you can buy and sell. So once we had this product, we can then sell it to a market, and there you can see we want to export it to Europe. Okay, so that's the whole green hydrogen thing. Why is that relevant for the Namibian economy? This project is quite large, right? So once you start building such a large project, we're looking at employing a lot of people, so potentially 15,000 people during the construction stage. On top of that, we should be able to produce a lot of excess electricity. And we want to use that excess electricity at home, but also exporting it into the Southern African power pool. So there you can see we've put a bubble there with Roshpina. What's happening in Roshpina? We refined zinc ore at Roshpina, and then we made zinc briquettes or ingots, and we would sell those. We stopped doing that. Why? Because it's a very energy-intensive industry, and we used to get almost 180 megawatts worth of electricity from South Africa to do that. But, of course, Eskom needs that more than we do, so we can't do zinc smelting in Namibia today because the electricity is too expensive. Once you start getting excess electricity, some of that coming from renewable energy, you can restart this whole industry as well. So Vedanta, for example, is looking at restarting this particular plant and even restarting a mine in Namibia where they can access up to 100,000 tons of zinc ore. So now already for your economy, there are two new things you're doing. A, you're exporting ammonia. B, you're beginning to mine zinc, but you're adding value to that zinc at home, which is what we always want to do in Namibia, right? Add value to our product. So now you take your zinc, you use your electricity, you smelt zinc ingots, and you're now exporting two different products from the same region, predominantly because you're beginning to harness that renewable electricity. And then, of course, you're now beginning to export more than just ammonia and zinc. Now you're also exporting electricity into the Southern African power pool, where at the moment we're importing a lot of electricity into the Southern African power pool. So the green hydrogen agenda was really not just for the molecule green hydrogen, it was to help set up this Southern Corridor Development Initiative, which of course begins to finance a complementary portfolio of interrelated infrastructure assets that essentially begin to help Namibia sell a diversified portfolio of goods and services. Other things will have to be developed, and I'll show you that in a second. Very important for Namibia to know, you see us there on the map, the size of those blue bubbles is how big our project is. It's very big here at home, but as you can see globally, it's not the biggest hydrogen project at all. Why is that important for us to know? It's a very competitive industry, and we're going to have to move with very dynamic legislation, and we're going to have to make sure that we're not looking to be too greedy early on. We're going to have to be competitive and compete with Chile, Australia, Oman, Saudi Arabia. All those guys are trying to do the same thing we're doing. So that just means we're going to have to put our best foot forward. What is this? On that other diagram I had, there was a port that we would have to develop. If you look on the bottom left-hand side of this presentation, it says RH Basin. That's Robert Harbor. That is existing Lüderitz port. That big one there in the middle is a new port terminal that we would have to develop. So that now already begins to give you an idea that just because of this green hydrogen, now you're already beginning to build a much larger, much more dynamic asset such as this port. And if you look there on the left-hand side with the legend, you can see all the different commodities that we would be looking to export through this port, which includes things like the zinc I was talking about. Potentially, you've got on there as well manganese that would come from South Africa, etc. And so you can, again, go back to the president's diagram where he was saying, we want to change the nature of our economy. You can see with this one asset, we could be exporting 2 to 3 different commodities. And then, of course, importantly, and we'll get there as well, this particular diagram is something very special. Not everyone has seen this, so maybe you guys are the first to see it in a public forum for a while. But we do know that Lüderitz will have all of this excess electricity. And we know that in the world today, there's a big demand for goods with low carbon content. So if we can capture all of this low carbon electricity and start to create green industrial zones, that's the real sort of long-term goal of ours, we can start to redesign the town of Lüderitz to host multiple new industries that are energy intensive and they're looking for cheap, clean energy. Or they're looking also for cheap, available hydrogen. Examples, pig iron. You take iron ore, you reduce it using hydrogen instead of using coal like they used before, and you can make pig iron, which is an ingredient to actually make steel. So that's one new industry we could attract. You could attract fertilizer manufacturing industries here as well, because of course ammonia is a big input into fertilizer. You could also attract other energy-intensive industries like aluminium smelting. Importantly as well, of course there's oil and gas 300 kilometers off the coast of Lüderitz. They're also potentially looking to integrate some of their business model into this business model. Hydrogen can be used to refine oil, but similarly you might be able to make low carbon content synthetic fuels that can be used to power some of the oil mining assets, and that could reduce the carbon content of the oil as well. So all of these potential new synergies that come about by having an energy-intense industry is what we're going to be thinking about here with Lüderitz. You can see they're thinking of redesigning the CBD, moving it out. There's some industrial zones here that will be created that could host, for example, green steel facilities, etc. This is very high level, right? And I've got 2 minutes. Why am I showing you this? I'm trying to show you this to help people realize that it's not about green hydrogen. It's about accelerating the economic transformation and the industrialization of Namibia. Okay, so that's the bigger picture. How do we get locals involved? This was my biggest mandate today, was to come and say, but what am I? I'm an SME. How do I get involved? We launched this SED framework yesterday in Keetmanshoop. The focus on this was to say, when government was engaging Hyphen to build this project, we said, we understand the project is big, etc., but we want our local people to be involved. So we carved out a few things. A, the employment, there's a target for 90% of those jobs to be Namibian. In terms of local procurement, we have a 30% target for local procurement. That project is about 200 billion Namibian dollars. 30% of that is 60 billion Namibian dollars. If you do 2 or 3 multiplier on that, you're looking at almost 180 billion. It's a big number. Key thing here is you see employment and skills development. Jobs, yes. Skills development, training, right? The type of jobs you'll be needed to do this are as complex as mechanical, electrical engineering, and chemical engineering, to as simple as artisans, drivers, HR people, health and safety. So there will be some skills development, especially in the vocational area, that will need to get done in order to ensure that there are enough Namibians to get employed there. But similarly, local procurement now means buying goods and services from local businesses here. Whether you're as big as ONL and Pupkewitz or you're a small SME, whether you're providing food, construction services, logistics, all of that is going to be needed. And what we're going to do is we're going to be conducting these baseline studies to go into the Namibian economy and say, look, this is Hyphen's process, and these are all the goods and services that it'll require, and then we'll go test the market and say, which of these goods and services can be sourced in Namibia, which of these are already sourced, which could start, and what do we need to do to support those SMEs to start, for example, right? So that's a process we're going to be doing for the next 12 months, and we launched that process last night, yesterday. And then the supplementary infrastructure, very important. So that's the roads, the housing that you'll need to build to house 15,000 people between Aus and Lüderitz, right? If you think about that alone, 15,000 houses, construction, again, put that on a multiplier effect. These are massive potential needle movers for our economy. CSI is important. That's, of course, the philanthropy that's involved. I'll try and finish real quick. That's the project, the industry, the industrialization. How do you fund this? We studied this concept of an SDG Namibia 1 fund. I actually saw asset managers were invited to this forum. I have my ex-colleague there, Tuyeni, who used to be an investment analyst. I found that to be super funny. But this SDG Namibia 1 fund is an infrastructure fund that will essentially attract capital with fund managers and then deploy that capital into various projects in Namibia. So you've got there Hyphen as an example of the first project, but it could also invest in hydrogen pipelines, some of the port facilities, common user infrastructure, etc. Where would the money come from? A plethora of different investors, and this is where this is super cool. So not tomorrow, later on today, Benedict then will talk about an integrated national financing framework. This is what it looks like in practice. It's the government going to look for blended financing, different types of money that come from different types of investors. Some have very developmental agenda, so they are willing to give you very cheap money, some of those innovative financial tools. Some just want to give you normal debt, other normal equity. And we're going to put that in this vehicle, and then we're going to deploy that into the projects. Very important thing here, this vehicle provides an opportunity for local pension funds to actually invest in this vehicle and start investing in projects here in Namibia. Last thing that's very important, this is on a project financing perspective. So this doesn't sit on the government balance sheet. It has limited recourse over the assets that it will fund. Amazing opportunity. We've got 40 million euros here from the Dutch. We're raising another 60 million this year. This is a game changer. Well, for Namibia and South Africa is also trying to do this now, by the way. The good thing here is Namibians now begin to participate in this economy on two ways. Building the project, but also financing it, using our own pension funds so that we can start enjoying economic returns as well. Did I make 6 minutes? No, you didn't. Okay, I didn't make 6 minutes. Hope you enjoyed it. Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, although he did not comply with the time limit, I think he deserves another round of applause, powered by green hydrogen. What I love about James' green hydrogen Nupe is that he acknowledges, ultimately, this is new, this is novel, this is quite a mammoth task, but it's about way more than green hydrogen. It is about accelerating our real economic transformation and industrialization. I don't know whether we realize the scope, impact, gravity, and magnitude of that acknowledgement and what is at play. My only true concern with James Green Hydrogen Nupe, he has the ability, he has the capacity to sell meat to a vegan without batting half an eyelid. Who concurs with that stance? 2 weeks ago, when Windhoekers were perishing of the cold, I was fortunate enough to be elsewhere. Was it not -6, -4 degrees Celsius, Mr. Kambala, at some stage? Now, on the coldest day of that week, this gentleman would be able to approach you at your doorstep with a bucket of ice and sell it to you at a profit, and you would buy it with a smile. So therein lies a real gift for the Namibian nation, a real treasure, but we also need to be very, very careful. Let him not outsmart us and the green hydrogen legacy. Let's give him another round of applause. Back then, when I was still at school, and on account of the use of my hair, you are able to tell that it was a number of moons ago, long, long time ago, when I was still at school, I heard this urban legend about actuaries. Apparently, No two actuaries are allowed to board the same flight because of the value that they add to the world, because of how rare that breed is that we refer to as actuaries. They're not allowed to board the same flight. I want us to reflect on what that means, what the implications of that would be. The other reality about James Green Hydrogen Nupa is that he's got serious competition. By far one of the most committed, by far one of the smartest, by far one of the most hardworking Namibians at the present moment. And he does so whilst being a real gentleman. I had dreads in my previous lifetime, so I would have said I'm taking my dreads off for him, but I can't, Mr. Libanda, because those no longer exist, at least physically. But I would like us to put our hands together for Mr. Jerome Namasip from the Dowries Green Hydrogen Village. This gentleman is busy setting up a whole entire green hydrogen village at Uis, of all places. And that is the applause that we are giving him. No man, guys.
I thought that one was bad. If you think that one was bad, you should have seen how Denver introduced me, I think a few months ago when he actually interviewed me prior to this. So I'm from the Dowries Green Hydrogen Village. I do actually also have a video. So I'd like to start with the video and then can go into the presentation.
Shall we dim the lights, please?
Hello Namibia, welcome to Green Hydrogen Village Phase 1. The 4 phase houses, and other side there you can see we are also busy with the training center and the laboratory, and on the other side you can see the grader is busy now with platform for greenhouse and for electrolyzer.
Water treatment consists of a water treatment plant that provides water for potable use, agriculture and for hydrogen production. The raw water comes from boreholes that are here on site. There's about 70 cubes of water being produced for the agriculture, 10 for potable use and 10 cubes for hydrogen production a day. We have done some borehole testing and there is sufficient water for this first phase of the project, the pilot project. And yeah, so we'll be treating the water using reverse osmosis technology because it is quite high in TDS, so dissolved salts. And then after that, for the hydrogen production, we'll be using an ultra pure water production step, something like demineralization, which will utilize continuous electro-deionization. And all of this will be powered by renewable energy.
Hi, I'm Mario Kenko. I'm originally from UIF. It's a great honor to represent the Dowries Green Hydrogen project. I'm employed by Nexus as a general worker, and this means a lot to me.
This is a great opportunity and a life-changing opportunity. I'm very much grateful for the Dowries Green Hydrogen Village, as I'm not employed and I can contribute to my family.
Okay. And then the presentation. Okay, perfect. Okay, so as mentioned, my name is Jerome Namasep. I'm from the Daures Green Hydrogen Village. So we are a recipient of funding which has been allocated to us by the German Research and Education Ministry on the back of a joint communique of intent signed between both the German and Namibian governments, with the implementers of this funding being SASCAL. So we are squarely on track with respect to our progress and our construction. And I'll just speak briefly about the project in its current form, the current work we're doing, and where we envisage heading to. Okay, so some of these, well, all of these images actually are actual images from the site. So the first time we actually went to site, or I went to site, noticed, some of these trees that, were lying within the veins that split off of a river downstream. And that's actually where we ended up drilling boreholes. So there was a recent media report which spoke to some of the water requirements on site and the absence of water, which we did correct with a media statement, but I can confirm that our water requirements per day are 96 cubes per day, of which only 10 to 12 cubes will be used in hydrogen production. So this is a pilot facility. It's on a small scale, hence the water requirements are significantly lower. The balance of the water will be used to support operations as well as an agricultural facility. And there was also, and I, to no fault of Denver, I think it's probably on myself, that there are these misconceptions. I also just have to re-clarify with respect to the location of this project. This project is not necessarily in Uys. We are actually 90 kilometers away from Uys. We are... and we are 130 kilometers away from Henties Bay. And I can also confirm that within a 50-kilometer radius, there are no inhabitants within this project area. So the nearest settlements with respect to this project are actually about 80 to 90 kilometers away. But this area does fall under a traditional authority as communal land, which is the Daure Daman Traditional Authority, as well as the Tsisep Conservancy. So just a bit about that project structure and how that actually happened, or how we've come to where we are. So we've engaged with the traditional authorities as well as the Tsisep Conservancy. We've followed, all legislative processes, including going to the necessary land boards, ministerial approvals, and we've obtained a land lease agreement for about 25 years with an option to renew for 50 years. And the current project structure is that 10% of this project shareholding actually sits with community groups. So about 7.5% with the Daure Daman Traditional Authority and 2.5% with the Tsisep Conservancy. Over and above that, we do have commitments to both of these community groups around employment, wherein 50% of our employment is to be sourced from the Daures constituency, and 30% of all activities with respect to construction of this facility are to be allocated to SMEs from the Daures constituency. And this is how we are trying to ensure that locals are also beneficiating from their resource within their natural area and ecosystem. Okay, so just a bit about this project. So some of the project objectives include the sustainable production of green hydrogen and green ammonia, which we will be producing. Of course, green hydrogen applications. We will be actually going to the market with a research call, of which we hope to encourage lots of Namibians to participate in, which will include the conversion of generators to run on hydrogen. We will also be evidencing sustainable production of carbon-free agriculture. We do have, and we are in the process of looking at a business case, which we've actually already completed, which would lead to the production of ammonia sulfate fertilizer. And this would be in our phase 1. Which could cater for about 30% of the ammonia sulfate fertilizer market in Namibia. And then over and above that, we wish to demonstrate sustainable jobs, a sustainable green economy with a sustainable ecosystem, as well as research opportunities for local and international students. So participating institutions in this project include the University of Namibia, as well as the University of Stuttgart. So if I can just speak about the phasing for this project. And, this project, it evolves quite quickly, that this slide is actually outdated probably as at today. So with respect to phase one, it is fully funded. We'll be producing about 100 tons of ammonia, so it's about 270 kgs per day of green ammonia. Ammonia isn't the friendliest compound out there. As such, there is that intention to start to produce ammonia sulfate fertilizer, which can then be used to cater to the local market. For subsequent phases, and I look at this project in two pieces, where we are currently and actively busy with the project management of phase one. We've finalized the appointments and the procurement of a lot of our long lead items, and we anticipate actually being done with the construction of phase one by the end of February 2024. With the hope and the intention to commission this facility in March 2024 and hopefully delivering Namibia's first batch of green hydrogen and green ammonia. Okay. But that must be said that although this project right now is deeply rooted in a research element and component, and that's why we are, really transparent and with some of the work that we're doing. We do host monthly seminars where we are trying to assist Namibians and take Namibians through the steps that we ourselves have taken with respect to project development, but at the same time also creating content such as what has been shared. This project does, though, have an industrial and commercial component to it. We are also busy with the necessary feasibility studies and optimization studies that lend to a phase 3 and a phase 4, which would lead to industrial level production of green hydrogen and green ammonia from the Dargos Green Hydrogen Village. Current estimates from some of the consultants we're working with, I think if I had to really shout one out right now, I'd speak about Finchner, who are German specialists in hydrogen and green ammonia, is that the estimation is that this site could actually produce in excess of about 750,000 tons of green ammonia and about in excess, on the back of in excess of about 2 gigawatts of renewable energy. So, as time goes, we intend to, tie up all these business cases together, and I'll be eagerly listening to the next slot, which speaks about all the amazing financing opportunities that do exist for projects such as these within a Namibian context. Hence, I was really pleased to actually see the slide that James had put up quite earlier with respect to SDG 1 and how this will open up, opportunities for financing for such projects like these. As you know, you definitely would want to not only syndicate or raise financing for, a project like this on an international market, but you would want local players to also participate as well. Okay. The next slide I actually just wanted to speak to, if I do have a second, was just to talk about some of the cool stuff that we're doing with respect to business development. So we have obtained an offtake agreement for about 40,000 tons, but it's becoming more and more evident that this number probably has to increase by a tenfold, because the reality is, to achieve economies of scale, our next phase is most likely going to have to produce at a minimum about 350,000 tons of green ammonia. James spoke earlier to an opportunity to actually, change the narrative and become an energy exporter. On the back of this site and on the back of our aspirations to achieve baseload production of renewable energy at a cost-effective rate, we have also we received interest from some SAPP players around the potential export of energy, and this ties in quite closely to what James alluded to a little earlier. And then there's always questions around where is the local offtake with respect to this. We're fortunate to be close to a mine which is looking to develop an asset and produce green lithium. We are looking at business cases that speak to the decarbonization of this mine, the use of hydrogen in its mining processes. As you know, this mine has aspirations to attract a greenium or green premium for its metals. And then lastly, collaboration with the WFP. And this is, of course, to support some of the WFP efforts within a Namibian context around, the provision of agri, where Namibia is still a large importer of a lot of agricultural produce, as well as fertilizer, to support some of their efforts in supporting farmers within a Namibian context. Excuse me? WFP, the World Food Program. Yeah. So a lot of work is going into developing these business cases for these subsequent phases, and we definitely do look forward to delivering on an industrial commercial project in due course. But in the meantime, this project is has a deeply rooted nature in research, and as such, we also look forward to welcoming, hordes of students from the University of Namibia as well as the University of Stuttgart, where you can actually start to get tangible, actual experience handling some of these, chemicals and compounds and lead to capacity building within a local Namibian context. Thank you.
Let's give him a big round of applause, please. Anyone from UIS in the room? 1, 2 hands. Listen, own it if you're from UIS. Who else is from UIS? I would be very concerned if I were you, and I'm going to add myself to your concerned group. He wants to be associated with Henties Bay, but not with UIS. Is that not already a problem in itself? Mr. Kambala, it is a serious problem. He's making all sorts of allegations, but we shall not entertain those. But you know what he did is, and that speaks to how smart he is, he's been trying his best to preempt the questions that I know exist in this room, and also some of those that I brought with me. But rest assured, he's going to get it still in a bit. I want you to take note of your questions that you have, both for Mr. Nyupe as well as for Mr. Namasep. We'll get to those in a bit. Kindly do not repeat anyone else's question. Kindly be to the point, always respectful, but very brief. Before we get going with the panel discussion and with Mr. Ricardo, whose surname I shall not pronounce in public's indulgence, I think we have about 30 minutes. Yes, because we started at 15:15, and he gave me 15 minutes extra. So we have about 30 minutes for the panel discussion and for the engagement. I would just like to do a very quick roll call. Is Mr. Tendai Kasinganeti, Climate Change Policy Analyst attached to the UNDP, who's scheduled to speak to us from the perspective of the World Bank report, in the room? Yes or no? Is he in the room? Very well. Are we ready with that presentation? And are we able to keep it brief and to the point within the ambit of 6 minutes? Mr. Nyupe stole 2 of your 6 minutes, and Mr. Namasep stole another 1 of your 6 minutes. So actually, you've got 3 minutes left, but yours is so important, and we'd like to hear it all. So let's give you your 6 minutes. Let's give him a round of applause, please. While he makes his way to the podium, let me also, in the interest of time, in the meantime call on Mr. Robert Kaimise, Chief Executive Officer of the Electricity Control Board, as well as Mr. Brian Asep, Acting Executive Director in the Ministry of Mines and Energy. Can you also make your way to the stage in the meantime? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It looks like we are in for a race for time, but I will try to maintain to the 3 minutes, which I doubt is possible, but I will try. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tendai Kasinganeti. I'm a climate policy and carbon market expert, currently supporting UNDP Namibia within Namibia's carbon markets framework, as well as activation of carbon markets projects implementation in the country. I observe the protocols that have already been established, and today I'm going to talk to you about how we can harness carbon finance into the different projects that are available, especially under renewable energy, green hydrogen, under the theme on collaboration for development in Namibia on the next, to establish Namibia as the next hub for renewable energy generation and green hydrogen. So, just to put this into perspective, I will start with nationally determined contributions. That has already been illustrated earlier by Mr. Reagan Chunga from the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism, where we have got an ambition as a country to establish a regional lead in in energy generation, as well as in green hydrogen production, as well as other byproducts such as ammonia. And our NDC, is National Determined Contribution, is clearly positioned to poise Namibia as the next generator of renewable energy, electricity generation, where we see that within our NDC, Namibia targets to offset or to reduce its emissions by around 11.9 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, and of those 11.9 million tons, about 3.6 will be under the generation of renewable energy, and of the 3.6, about 2 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent would be under renewable energy and green hydrogen. So what that means, or translate, it means that there is need for more financing, and then that will look at around the 15 billion that is being targeted, or that is being earmarked for resource mobilization. Just for renewable hydrogen, we're looking at around 1.58 billion US dollars to be able to implement this. So to mobilize resources for the country and to implement, we realize that decarbonization is a global mega trend, and that is poised to become or to influence how businesses are going to operate from now going forward into the next decade and more. And there are various ways and methods that which we can be able to raise our finance, mobilize finance to implement different and various projects. We have had indications of how the green hydrogen villages are poised to become the next hubs of green or low carbon industries. And how do we enable this to be established? Because we are currently sort of like looking for financing around the green hydrogen. So there are different forms of financing that we can work with. We have got green bonds that have been alluded. Bank Windhoek is ready, looking to work into it. Different and various means of climate finance that Environmental Investment Fund is successfully handling and doing resource mobilization in all aspects of the green and climate landscape. And I'm here to talk about carbon credits, and I'm going to try to explain to you or show you how carbon credits in the national market mechanism under carbon trading can be used, or we can harness them as a country to trade and access technologies. So carbon credits are certificates. A carbon credit is a certificate that represent a reduction of 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide or its equivalent. So we call it a carbon dioxide equivalent, and these credits are generated by various emission reduction projects, such as those focused on renewable energy, reforestation, waste management, as well as any other projects such as clean waste to energy. So a single carbon credit can be able or can be calculated to say, after you release 1,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, then you can be able to say you've got a 1 carbon credit, and within that credit, we can attach a value based on the additionality and integrity of that specific credit that we have generated. And we look forward that we can be able to harness this new trend and access carbon finance with it. So how big is the global market for carbon credits, and how can we work around it? So you realize that the global carbon market is driven by public perception, is driven by policy, is driven by need and appetite for carbon credits, and is also driven by the generation or generation of credits within the developing countries as they are generating or creating projects for uptake. And it is anticipated that by 2050, the carbon credit market will be well above 200 billion US dollars of value. And we anticipate that through these and such economic and financial needs that the country needs for green hydrogen, we can be able to also get a piece of it and be able to implement most of our projects. And under carbon, the global carbon market, we realize that the market trends are shifting towards renewable energy, and renewable energy is poised to become the next big thing in generating what we call renewable energy credits, and these are calculated based on carbon credits. So carbon credits can allow for a carbon market mechanism to be established within the country, And it has already been established in Africa at large, and we look forward that we have positive social, positive ecological, and climate change mitigation impacts and benefits to the community and to the country at large. And this is not only being implemented in Namibia, but this is being implemented at a global level, and Africa is trying to get hold of the low-hanging fruit on how we can be able to access this. Thank you. I'll skip and not explain some of the elements. So you realize that there are two ways in which you can harness or work around carbon markets. They are what we call voluntary carbon markets, and there is the Paris Agreement Article 6 that you can also use to work under this. So under voluntary carbon markets, it is actually expected that will grow the African voluntary carbon market 19-fold from mitigation of around 300 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent to around 2.5 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And Namibia is also targeting this, as you've already anticipated, that we are trying to target a reduction of about 11.9 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in terms of reductions. So by implementing this, will create so many economic opportunities, and it is anticipated by 2030 we have about 30 million jobs that will be established and that would come out of this. So there is an African Carbon Market Initiative, which we've been in discussions with and is currently supporting different players, and we hope we're going to work it even around green hydrogen and how we can work to establish markets, to mature markets, and to develop high-value carbon credits with high integrity and with social additionality so that our communities can be able to benefit from this. So that is vulnerable carbon markets. And Article 6, there is a platform that has been set by the UNFCCC to see how countries can work together, and we have set up Article 6.2 and Article 6.4, where different companies, and Article 6.2, governments and government-to-government agreements can be set, and financing can be transferred to the communities to develop green projects that can have mitigation ambitions be calculated. And at the same scale, Article 6.4 is also providing a global market in which carbon credits can be traded or transferred. Here is just an illustration of how about 18 countries, in developing countries, they have developed various projects around methane, renewable energy, and etc. But you realize that under Article 6, there has not been any project on green hydrogen, and we look forward that Namibia will be the first to implement this. I will skip this slide since my time is limited, but I'll also talk about what is there in Namibia and what has been created for the country. Namibia has the national determined contributions that has been set. We also have a Namibia carbon markets framework that has been set and is going to be approved by cabinet. We also have got a low carbon emissions regulations that is coming to enhance and support implementation of this, and we've got an MRV system that has been set. We're looking forward for private investments, partnerships, and creating opportunities within the Namibian economy on how we can harness carbon markets for implementation. In support of this, we've got the Namibia's Carbon Markets Registry that has been set, and you don't have to struggle to see how can you develop projects around renewable energy, around forestry and other projects, because we will be able to provide this service to the people. Lastly, I would like to also sort of like, it's more like a campaign, but just to indicate what is there and what is your next step as you go forward. Why this is important is that I was requested to talk on how we can harness renewable energy in green hydrogen and work around the mix. But carbon credits cannot only be generated by renewable energy, but any other projects in waste, forestry, composting, e-vehicles, green hydrogen vehicles in other markets. So what this means is we've got an institutional arrangement that has been set, and we are going to have the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Tourism has set a framework in which we can work under Article 6.2, 6.4 in vulnerable carbon markets, and there is a framework and an institution where you'll be able to go to get more information on how you can be able to implement your projects, get your projects registered, get your projects authorized, get your projects evaluated and audited, and this has all been done through the support of the United Nations Development Program, Namibian country office. I had put in a model, but I'm not going to present on it, but the model was just going to show how can you also develop a model that includes carbon finance as an option or as a mix of financial sources to support development of a carbon project. And some of the green hydrogen projects are still being developed. Different green hydrogen villages are being developed. So there are different models on how we can enhance or improve our source of revenue and capital injection into the different projects that we need to implement. And we can develop different financing models that have got carbon finance in them in different sectors of the economy. I'm really tight under time. I would have said more, but thank you very much. Okay.
Let's please give him a big round of applause. Mr. Libanda, I feel absolutely terrible. We need to apply somewhere for a bit more time. I don't know how we're going to go about it. The challenge is we might leave quite a bit of meat on the proverbial bone. But the point also is this platform serves as a conversation starter. We need to get our minds going. We need to reflect on what we've done so far and what needs to happen and when that needs to happen. We will never have enough time. The gentleman who has undertaken to speak not 1 second longer than 5 minutes, because he was actually scheduled to speak for 15 minutes, but we have a number of people committing the common law offense of theft that relates to time, and they're seated right here in front of you. Follow my eyes, do not look now. But this gentleman is a super brave man. We saw how brave he was during his tenure in the Namibian capital under very troublesome circumstances, in very murky waters. He stood strong with conviction. It couldn't have been easy, but he made it. But he's become even braver after we let him go for another region, which we shall not mention at this platform, out of respect for that region, and has now returned to the capital. Who of you in this room is unaware of how much you get in this very July 2023 for $50 if you buy electricity? How many units? Is it even 1 unit? A quarter of a unit? You know, we've got relatives, right, who ask us, kindly send me $50 for electricity, please. How many units do we get? Madam Tennyson, how many units do we get for $50? No. After what we recently saw in this country, I said $50. For $20 you don't even have. So you can't even buy. The machine doesn't take your $20. My hard worked for $20 Namibian, the machine wouldn't accept. Not for half a unit of electricity. Listen guys, the gentleman who is behind all of this is here. And he wants to address us in 5 minutes because he does believe that there's value in collaboration if we are to realize our dream of making Namibia Africa's energy hub. He's the Chief Executive Officer of none other, believe it or not, the Electricity Control Board. He goes by the name of Mr. Robert Kaimise. Let's please give him a round of applause.
Denver, you are not making it difficult for me. You are making it even more difficult for me. This is the gentleman. So you can stone him and do whatever you can do. So I have 5 minutes flat. My role is to create an enabling environment to complete the puzzle. Mega projects, the environment needs to be enabling. So that's why I'm here. I've been invited here. Due to time, briefly, the mandate of ECB, the Electricity Control Board. We are here to exercise control, not only over tariffs, but also the quality that you are receiving. Just following up on questions from Denver, how many of you have experienced load shedding?
Please raise your hand properly, guys.
We are talking about Namibia. Spoiled Namibians. Go next door or go in the region. The ECB is also responsible to ensure that what you are getting as a commodity, it has to comply with certain standards. Okay? safety issues, maintenance standards, and also security of supply, which we have done very well, irrespective of the prevailing tariffs. And we have to promote investment as well. We are the only country in Africa. Most of them are still captured in a single buyer model. Vertical integrated utility doing everything. They are the only buyer. Namibia, as small as we are the trendsetter in attracting investment. Yes, we can tap ourselves in attracting investment in generation and also opening up the market through a modified single buyer market model. Now even a distributor, they are off-takers of impended generation. City of Windhoek, in actual fact, when some of us there, we were dreaming of a waste-to-energy project, megawatts, and even renewable energy. Who's the overseer? The Electricity Control Board, in addition to tariff setting. Core regulatory areas, economic regulation refers to tariff setting. Technical regulations is all the standards setting as well as inspections. We have compliance engineer at ECB that goes out and ensure that you are getting, it's complying to certain standards. We have raised some red flags. Lately, I think we were in Hobabes, we told them, this is the time you have, fix it, otherwise we'll take steps. That's what we are doing on a daily basis. Licensing, these mega projects, you have seen the megawatts, they need to be licensed. By who? ECB. We provide oversight, not only about distribution, the end consumer provider, that you actually feel their service, but from generation, transmission, as well as energy trading, and all the players in the supply chain. We have to make sure that the playing field is leveled. IPPs, they are supposed to get also a fair treatment from the MSB office that is now in NamPower. We are the regulator, we have to make sure that is also happening. And we also mediate. Most people don't know that. If you have issues with any licensee, you can approach ECB for mediation. On the energy global market, Denver, the world is evolving and growing. The intention of the African Union is to establish what we call African electricity market. Where will it originate from? From the SAPP, that is now the Southern African Power Pool, and we have similar markets in the north, west, east. It has to evolve now into a typical African energy market. That discussion is ongoing, the resources are there. We hope to realize that in a few years' time. So you have heard about surplus. Now it's not even SEP.
1 minute, please, sir.
1 minute, definitely. So it's not even a regional market. We can even go bigger. What is the expectations from competitive market? Prices should, all things being equal, go down. Yeah. So there are some benefits coming our way. In conclusion, carbon credits market has been covered. I'll proceed. Green hydrogen, the electricity that is going to power these mega projects. And you have seen the megawatts will be licensed by ECB. The tariff for fitting into the grid, it will be determined by ECB. That is our role currently. Okay. And also, what about the pipelines and storage of these big projects? Surely, currently, we cannot regulate the infrastructure relating to green hydrogen, but everything has been envisaged a few years back. ECB soon will be transformed into an energy regulator that will have oversight over the pipelines, which is the transportation of green hydrogen gas, whether it goes outside or local, storage facilities as well. And that's it. I've touched on the modified single buyer. That is ECB in a nutshell, just to complete the puzzle. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, for his bravery, he certainly deserves a bigger round of applause. We have 16 minutes for both the panel discussion and for the engagement from the floor. We will have not a second more than that. If you've already asked questions during the course of the morning, you may not ask a question again this afternoon, unless no one else has a question. You know exactly who it is that you are. Names shall not be named. I will not even look in your direction. So let's please give those who have not had an opportunity to ask yet the opportunity to do exactly that. Gentlemen, I certainly wish we had at least 2 more hours just for this leg of the journey. I would imagine that you're super grateful that we don't, but let's do our best with the 15 minutes that we have left. Mr. Newpie, in essence, the average Namibian wants to know, yes, it's a noble goal. Yes, it's a mammoth task. Yes, you are conceding that ultimately it's not about green hydrogen. It is about unlocking our economic potential, getting that journey going, and realizing this dream of industrialization. Be that as it may, we still want to know, are you selling us dreams? This green hydrogen story, is it realistic by any stretch of the imagination? Kindly keep your response very brief. Thank you. Just switch on the microphone, please. Yes. Very well. For 5 marks, why should we believe you that yes, this dream is actually attainable in our lifetime, given the present set of circumstances?
Because Nicholas back there from HDF wants to build a $4.5 billion project next year. He's about to reach financial close. He's got an off-taker in Swakopmund that's going to buy his electricity, and his tariff is going to be regulated by Kahimise, and his asset might be partly owned by STG Namibia 1 and NamPower. That's a real first project that starts construction next year. This guy has hired 100 people today, given Nexus a $100 million contract. He's building a green hydrogen village and has managed to attract, like, what is that, 250 million Namibian dollars to build a pilot project. So green hydrogen is no longer like something we're going to do in 2030 as it was being advertised 2 years ago. It's happening today. Hyphen has already started hiring people. We're already beginning to think of the next RFP. And we have 4 different hydrogen projects that are going to be built in the Irongo Valley. So we started, we're running. I'm not sure you have to stretch your imagination that much to apply for a job at Dowres, but it's up to you.
Let's give him a round of applause. I have at least 2 million questions for this man, and I'm sure you have 3 million. We don't have the luxury of time. Have you any idea how frustrating that is? So let's just catch our breath and let's take a deep breath in the meantime. Mr. Namasip, you preempted the question around water scarcity at Henties Bay. You said you're not at Uys. You're in fact at Henties Bay, allegedly. It's one thing to tell us that the envisaged project, this green hydrogen village, will not use a lot of water. But the point is, there's not much water to use, is what one very concerned delegate came to me while I was enjoying lunch and said, this needs to be raised. Yes, we can say we won't use a lot of water, but there's not much to use. So even if you wanted to, you wouldn't have been able to. How do you plan to deal with that challenge?
Okay, again, I must restate, we are not in Henties Bay either. We are 90 kilometers from Uys, 130 from Henties Bay. So as I stated a little earlier, with respect to the hydrogen generation alone, the usage of water is between 10 to 12 cubes, with the majority of water usage to be used in a agricultural smart greenhouse facility. This facility is going to be one of a kind. We're going to be starting with its establishment or with respect to construction next week. And it does have about a 30% water saving mechanism. So the reality is by the third month of operations, our water consumption would likely reduce further by another 30% on the back of that. And then, of course, just over and above that, the business strategy with respect to the agricultural component is to step up the usage of the facility over a prolonged period of time, thereby providing us with an opportunity to actually assess how the groundwater levels actually change over a period of time. We have followed all required processes with respect to permitting and received necessary approvals. The facility is downstream. If I had a map, I could show it to you. We are not taking water from a river, which has also been previously reported. We are using water on site from boreholes dug on site where, for all intents and purposes, we are the last user of this water as it, flows from inland out to the coast.
Thank you. And because you're so far away from Uis, you're not taking water from Uis, right?
No,
Very
we're
well.
not taking water from Uis.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm unable to hide my frustration, but that's where we're at. Mr. Kayemisi, just very briefly, you told us that we are yet to experience, and we might not experience, load shedding in this country. There are at least 2 human beings whom I see at the present moment who are ordinarily resident in the Hardap region, where they had, at least for 1 or 2 nights, what they claimed was in fact load shedding. What are the prospects of that, seeing that we do know that our local authorities are struggling to pay what is due to NamPower, and we don't know what ripple effect that will have in the end, and in the meantime, they've been instructed not to deal with those. But be that as it may, talk to us about the capacity of the land of the brave to explore the competitive advantage that we have within the energy sector, if our pursuit is collaboration to ultimately become Africa's energy hub. Kindly keep it brief and to the point, please.
Thank you, Denver. I think because that's the job of the leaders, which they have done very well. From the head of state, this is the vision for Namibia. Okay? And everything has been put in place to realize that vision. From the energy side, Denver, briefly as you have said, please take note, the end product is not electricity necessarily. Okay? You have heard it very clear, hydrogen, ammonia, and. And if these projects are properly packaged, especially when it comes to the products being exported in hard currency, what is the possibility of the surplus energy to be subsidized? And we know our peak demand. Namibia, small. Look at the fourth phase of the Daures project. It's talking about 670 megawatts. Okay. In Lutretz, even bigger. What is the possibility of that surplus energy to be fully subsidized so that at the end of the line, it would allow us to cross-subsidize the blended tariff for all Namibians? I don't think I'm crazy to think like that. It's possible, isn't it? So the success of these big projects, colleagues and Namibians, if it is successful, definitely is on not only the numbers that has been portrayed here, in the energy space, we might also benefit. That is on affordable tariffs, if I may say that.
That is nutrition for thought, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, the green hydrogen space, whether the future will be realized or not, is certainly what you need to enter now. I don't know to what extent the cameras are zooming into the stage, but gentlemen are busy with iPhone 30s. Did you know that they exist? Well, they're existing right here. Before we open the floor for the 5 minutes that we have, Ricardo's not in the room, right? Please don't call him. Don't notify him. Mr. Kasinganetti, he's here. Very well. We've got 5 minutes to go. Thank you, sir. Please help us understand, and Mr. Libanda, you shared with us that we need about $9 billion US by 2030. Am I correct? For mitigation only, mind you. From your perspective, how can we close the gap between what we are able to raise locally versus what is available, particularly because we are struggling to hold the developed world accountable, who are primarily responsible for the carbon emissions, and promise, empty promise after empty promise, yet they don't pay up. Very briefly, you've got 2 minutes maximum.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, for that. Such an interesting question, but given that, for example, Environmental Investment Fund is already working on different climate financing mechanisms, GCF, Adaptation Fund, GAF, you name it, the potential opportunity to access further financing is presented particularly through carbon markets, international carbon market mechanisms. The idea being that we need to create, to take advantage of, we are going to help ourselves and at the same time help the developing world to achieve their mitigation ambitions. So Namibia has got its own national determined contributions and its own mitigation ambitions. And any other country, let's say, take for example, Switzerland or Japan or Germany, they also have got their own national determined contributions that they should achieve and submit to the UNFCCC as part of their ambition, mitigation ambition goals. So how does this work? Namibia can poise...
You got 30 seconds, please.
Okay. Namibia can then poise itself to offer to implement some of these mitigation projects, and some of these mitigation projects being green hydrogen. And we have already put forward carbon markets as the main engine that will be able to drive green hydrogen projects, implementation, electric vehicles, and etc., to raise almost around 3 billion. So what this means is carbon markets can do the heavy lifting of most of these key financial requirements and key investment that are going to be required.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Ricardo.
Thank you very much.
Right.
We have time for 4 questions. 1 question per gentleman. Please do not give us an introduction about why we're here. I've done it, Ricardo has done it, everyone else has already done it. Don't tell us who you are apart from your name and who the question is directed to. 1 question for a delegate, and the next person on the side asks another delegate, and then 2 on the side for the 2 others. If you've asked a question during the course of the morning, kindly sit down.
Okay.
Sie haben noch keine Fragen gestellt heute Morgen.
All right. What was the first question that you asked Mr. Green Hydrogen Minupe?
We asked about whether or not the dream is realistic and attainable.
Exactly. I'm representing a company called Green Go, which hired me yesterday to facilitate for them investment in green hydrogen in gigawatt size. So my question is, James, what procedures, what steps do companies like Green Go and others have to take in order to be accepted as investors within the Namibian context?
So thank you very much. Another question, is that question for the other 3, for one of them? No, it needs to be for one specific speaker. Please give him the microphone. And you didn't ask any questions this morning. Very well. Thank you. Kindly, 2 people on this side, make sure that you didn't ask a question this morning. Very well. 1, 2, you've been identified. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Klaus Wartboy. My question is basically, we talk so much about benefits surrounding this project. And I know it's trial and error at this point, but how thorough has your environmental assessment impact been? Your feasibility studies and so on.
Is that for Mr. Namasip? Very well. Thank you very much. The lady, so your question will be either for, it has to be for one of the 2 gentlemen at that end. Sir, is your question for one of them? Is your question for one of the two gentlemen at the end? Mr. Nyupa and Mr. Namasep have had their turn. Do you have a question for one of the two gentlemen there, please? Very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Jason Hailonga. It's just on carbon.
Who is the question for? Make it specific, please, sir.
Apparently I must stand up. Okay, thank you. So the question is for the gentleman that presented on carbon credits. Carbon credits, it's such a big debated issue because obviously there is benefit on our side if we are able to reduce the emissions, quantify those credits, sell them to someone else sitting in Asia that can buy them to essentially continue emitting. That's what, So how do we manage that moral issue? Because essentially the earth is one. So I'm sitting here, just imagine China is next door.
Sorry, sir, you don't have to give context.
How do we manage that moral issue of carbon credits?
Thank you very much. Madam, so your question will be for Mr. Kayimise.
Thank you very much.
You may tell us who you are, please.
My name is Abia, but I do turn down your offer. I just have a question. On the Daras village, I wanted to ask, because you are saying you are building boreholes. Now I wanted to ask, how are you going to maintain that? Because if you're saying you're going to start using less water, are you going to recycle? If you're going to recycle, how are you going to
Thank you, madam. You can't answer the question that you're asking, but thank you very much. Let's give Mr. Namas an opportunity. All right. Mr. Nyupe, please go for it.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think any prospective investor that wants to invest in the space... Okay, cool. Can you hear me well? Thank you. So any prospective investor that wants to develop prospective hydrogen projects, at this point in time, we don't require them to register their interest with any body, right? To give you an example, some of the private sector investors in the Irongo Valley, where government does not control that land, they have approached normal farmers, they've acquired the land, and they've started to conduct some sort of feasibility study. Of course, they would ask for the normal permits with regards to EIAs, etc., but they don't have to register as a green hydrogen investor per se. However, just to complete the question, if, for example, some of the investors are looking to raise money from SDG Namibia 1, they do go and register their prospective project with SDG Namibia 1 for it to start being reviewed as a potential recipient of capital from the fund. So, your green hydrogen goal company, we're very happy to talk to them, understand how and where they want to fit in, and then guide them to various private sector players or various regulators for them to start expressing their interest. I think NIPDB would be a perfect place to start. But of course, the Green Hydrogen Council is also happy to speak to them. Thank you.
It's no secret that Mr. Nyupe is one of the most accessible and available people in this country. So of course, if you have additional questions, you will know where to find him. Mr. Namasep, you've got 2 questions. Kindly keep your responses brief.
Okay, the first one was with respect to the environmental assessment. As you know how the process does work in Namibia, it's a public process. EIAs are published, advertised, available for comments. It then goes through a review process and it's approved and you receive your ECC. This project is in possession of an ECC. Anyone that has an interest to see our EIA is happy to do so. It's available, I believe, at the ministry, but I'd be happy to share as well. I think that answers the first one with respect to the ECC. And then with respect to the water and the sustainability, I was just talking with respect to a short to medium term, that the water usage will be, there will be savings with respect to the water usage, 96 cubes a day. Just for reference perspective, we've drilled about 8 boreholes. The boreholes are giving us between 3 to 5 cubes each. So in fact, our plan is only actually to pump these boreholes for 8 hours a day to allow for rest and recovery. But the long-term sustainable solution with respect to this project, and I think with respect to the industry as a whole, will of course be desalination. We are 40 kilometers away from the ocean in a straight line.
Henties Bay, remember.
And we are investigating various means through which to access desalinated water. It's either through an existing desalination facility, which is managed and owned by Orano, or alternatively own desalination for own consumption.
Thank you.
The business case will determine.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you have a number of follow-up questions. Unfortunately, it is what it is. Mr. Kasinganete, just very briefly about the moral, ethical issues around the carbon credits.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the question. I think I'll answer your question just in two parts, very briefly. The first is that we have got nationally determined contributions by all countries that are party to the UNFCCC. Namibia is party to it, and any other country in Asia, as you have mentioned, is also party to it. And we have got our mitigation ambition goals and targets that we have set. For Namibia, we require 9 billion to implement our mitigation ambitions, not adaptation. And they also have got their mitigation ambition. So what that means is they will support Namibia to achieve their mitigation ambition goals, because we need it, and there is no morality issues attached. I will also answer it secondly, to make it easy to understand, is that you can just imagine if we are in this room, is all closed, and maybe a toxic gas is released from this door behind me, and the exit is the one that is open to release that gas. It does not matter where the emissions reductions are being done, because this one the globe is just one unit, and you can do your mitigation activities or carbon sink or carbon capture or sequestration activities anywhere in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Gentlemen, you each have 15 seconds just to tell us about the ultimate capacity of the land of the brave to become Africa's energy hub if we imagine that we're in a safe space and we can be honest and sincere. So that is my invitation to you. 15 seconds, your brief concluding remarks about the prospects of this country to become Africa's energy hub. Remember, the brief is that you're in a safe space, you can be honest and vulnerable.
All right, thank you. What I will say is, as you have said, decarbonization is a global megatrend. It has become a thing, and it's going to grow in the coming decades. So if Namibia harnesses and put itself in a position that enables it to attain and attract investments and off-taking of credits, we can be able to implement projects that we cannot even imagine of. All we just need to do is to ensure that we are in a capacity to be able to prove that we can receive funds, able to manage them appropriately and transparently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kaimisa, your brief concluding remarks. Is there light at the end of the ECB tunnel?
Yes. Definitely there is light. Green hydrogen has been envisioned, is it over the last 4 to 5 years, James? The Namibian electricity supply industry has been opened for more than 10 years. Facing our own handicaps or challenges, colleagues, due to the economies of scale, we envisioned Namibia to become a net exporter. Anyone can put up whatever mega projects that you want in Namibia, use our transmission or create your own, evacuate the power into the region. And soon, we will achieve that goal. And also soon, probably, you will be able to balance off the cost of electricity and offer affordable electricity to Namibians.
Okwe Pashinene. Mr. Namasep, your brief concluding remarks, please.
I think I'll go with, it's going to take 100 of these types of projects, such as DARES, for us to be able to build an industry. And the industry can only really survive if Namibians participate in it and if Namibians support it. It's an opportunity for us to change a narrative. Although it does seem complex, I don't think anything is beyond our capabilities if sufficient time, effort, and research is put into it. I would encourage Namibians to try and find ways to participate in this project development. You'll remember when solar started, it sounded crazy, but I guarantee you everyone here has a friend, cousin, or uncle who has tried now to establish a solar facility and sell energy, or registered an energy company to sell solar, or participate in some manner. And it's going to be pretty much the same for this. It does seem far away, but it's an opportunity, and it's an opportunity that we can capitalize on today. And I'd encourage Namibians to support it and try and participate.
Thank you very much, sir. Let's give him a round of applause. Remember, if you book a flight, kindly inquire from the airline whether or not another actuary has booked already, and then you have to cancel that reservation. We can't afford to have two of you on the same flight. Mr. Nyupe, you have the brief final word for this session this afternoon.
Thank you, Denver. I'll, because it's you, try to be brief, but also try to be open-ended. Namibia has all of the requisite ingredients to become an African energy hub, not the African, right? We're not going to try to become the biggest one, but we want to become a successful one. So we have okay. So that's one. Number two, the goal is larger and more complex than I think we can carry alone. So we need to be able to work with international customers, labor we don't have in Namibia, technology we don't have in Namibia, capital that we don't have in Namibia. That is more complex than it sounds, because it means we will need to be able to welcome people who are not here, who can bring some skills, expertise, capital, people like Nicholas. And at the same time, we need to create enough opportunities to absorb those of us who are not unemployed. To me, the biggest challenge for us to become an energy hub is an anthropological one, not a financial one, not an engineering one, and certainly not a systemic one. It is going to be anthropological. And if that word is very complex, in a very simple ways, it's going to be an immigration policy issue. That's my opinion. But we have all the ingredients to succeed in this space, and we have enough friends internationally who want us to succeed in this space.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ala James, Green, Hydrogen, Nyupe, a lot of nutrition for thought. Madam Nangula Wanja, the Chief Executive Officer and Chairperson of the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board, once publicly accused me of being a draconian timekeeper. Now, notwithstanding my draconian efforts, we did go 11 minutes over the time that we had. I do know that we have a lot of questions still. I do know we want to follow up. I do know we want to engage. Remember, we still have an event this evening, so you can then approach whoever it is that you still need to speak to. Make sure that you network. Make sure that you get the email address, that you get the cell phone number. I'm sorry, but also not sorry. That's all the time we had. Let's please give this panel a big round of applause. That round of applause certainly was not powered by green hydrogen. Let's give them a round of applause. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your expertise. Thank you for your sacrifice for this country. Thank you for the heavy lifting. Thank you for taking the punches on behalf of many of us. We do know that it's not easy, but we appreciate you for showing up. And for me, Denver Kisting, it's bye-bye. Until next time.
It's a land of pride and dignity. Namibia, we love thee. It's a land of diversity. That's where we want to be. Namibia, little, Namibia, little.
Next time, please, we'll not have TV presenters moderating. Thank you. These things are...
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you. I know that it has been a very long day, but it's been a very long and fruitful day, hasn't it? Very informative as well. On behalf of all television presenters, I would like to apologize for the fact that today we learned that 15 minutes is indeed not 15 minutes. But we ensure you that on the outside world, time limitations remain the same, so please do not try that at home, yeah? Nonetheless, we thank the previous moderator, Denver, as well as the previous speakers for the informative panel discussion. And I will be moderating the final session. Of course, I do understand that it is quite late, so we will try and keep it as compact yet as informative as possible. Now, we do have two presentations that were supposed to take place before we head into our final panel discussion. And those two presentations were, of course, by Mr. John Mukwamataba. It was supposed to be a presentation on the SDG Namibia 1 program and the finance framework. That is Mr. John Mukwamataba and Mr. Benedict Libanda. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, they've been called to a very important meeting, and so they will not be joining us. That means that we have ample time to do our final panel discussion and enough time for all of you to ask the questions that you would like to ask. With that said, the final panel discussion is with regards to the design and effectiveness of the global climate finance architecture, which includes the role of international climate funds, multilateral development banks, and bilateral funding mechanisms. Now, today we will be particularly honing in on ways to enhance coordination, alignment, and collaboration among different finance sectors. My name is Josie Ngipandwa, and I will be your moderator for this session. Now, allow me to introduce our panelists, and they were supposed to be 5. Unfortunately, they will only be 3, but I can guarantee you the 3 that will be joining us, of course, have enough expertise to fill the room with the necessary knowledge and enlightenment. Our first panelist, of course, the Natural Resource Management Program Coordinator from GIZ, Mr. Clemens Ria. If Clemens could join us on stage, please. Welcome with a round of applause. Clemens Ria, can I see by hand signal if they are with us? Okay. It seems Clemens had a very fruitful lunch and the nap creeped in on time. Also supposed to be joining us on our panel discussion is the resident representative from UNDP, Alka Bhatia. Is Alka here? Alka, yes, Alka is here. Trust the women to be present always. Thank you very much for joining us, Alka. You may take your position on the stage. As well as none other than the Bank Windhoek's Chief Treasurer, Claire Hobbs. Is Claire present? Yes, Claire is also here. Thank you very much, Claire. So I see Clemens is not here, Mr. Benedict Libanda is also not here, and Mr. John Mukwamataba is also not here. It is a women's party, but they always say women always have the most fun together, so that means this will be the most fruitful panel discussion for the day. Now, I think I'm first going to delve into the questions that I have prepared particularly for the two of you with regards to the portfolios that you have. And thereafter, perhaps we can delve into some of the other questions I would have asked the other panelists that maybe you might be able to add on to with regards to the panel discussion. Ooh, sorry. So, Alka, I'll start with you. The very first question that I have for you is with regards to the global climate finance architecture, which involves multiple actors, including international climate funds, multilateral development banks, and bilateral funding mechanisms. Now, how can we ensure that effective coordination is present among these actors that can maximize the impact of climate finance on developing countries, especially a country like Namibia?
Thank you very much and a very good afternoon. So I I can't say I'm unhappy that the others have deserted us, right? Because you have a very packed schedule. But I think, well, yes, I get more time to speak.
Yes.
On a topic which is, which I'm really passionate about. And let me give you a little perspective which I had thought would come from the presentations you had on the topic, since it's about climate finance and it's about international climate finance. So in this area, you asked a very good question. You know, climate finance or climate change, let me start with why we need climate finance. Because climate change is a very real thing. It's impacting us day in, day out, morning to evening, across all our lives, whether we realize it or not. And I think it is time that we actually gave it a little bit more consideration than it is currently being given. Yes, we do have funding windows, which are in the form of all of these international financing, the international financing architecture. And let me just take a step back to 2015, right when the whole discussion with regard to the sustainable development goals was underway. And this is about the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. And that is where the world leaders and the people at large, more importantly, conceived that for the next 20, 30 years, we would need a massive injection of funds if we are to address some of these issues of sustainability, and environmental sustainability being one. And for that, they created a mechanism or suggested a mechanism which is called the Integrated National Financing Framework for Countries. Why I'm talking about this INFF, and that was the presentation I thought which was on there, which would have really set the stage. Namibia is one of those first few countries who actually took a decision to establish an integrated national financing framework. What is an integrated national financing framework? It is about aligning public, private, domestic, international financing flows around your development priorities. So it is about having financing flows addressing national development plans. So you are basically bringing together or aligning the budgeting financing flows to your national development priorities. And within the national development priorities, what is it that you have? You have climate change, environmental sustainability as one of the key ones. I'm talking about Namibia now. But is climate change being mainstreamed across all sectors, or is it just left to be the sole function of one player or one ministry? That is the question that we all need to deliberate upon. And this is what the INFF, or the Integrated National Financing Framework, would be doing when it brings together all the financing flows, aligning this, including the international climate finance issues that we are talking about. And that is the whole coordination which will happen. You would raise this issue about coordination. How do you then indicate the specific roles of all of the players, whether in government, whether in the private sector, whether the people themselves? How can that coordination, how can we clarify on those roles and responsibilities? So that is one of the biggest issues of our time. Namibia is on the verge of concluding its integrated financing strategy. We already have a draft. It will now be subjected to scrutiny and consultation. And then we are talking about establishing this framework where you would have the governance and the coordination structures where both the public sector and the private sector need to participate. Let me stop here.
Right. Thank you very much, Alka. And of course, before we get back to you to just delve deeper into that framework, I'd like to move over to Claire briefly. Claire, the private sector plays a significant role in climate finance, as we all know. How can we foster a greater collaboration between public and private finance actors to scale up investments in climate-friendly projects and initiatives?
Good afternoon, everybody. So I think we listened to Joachim, my colleague, speak about our green bond and our sustainability bond. I think that was brought about by the SunRef program that we also mentioned. But I think that was just the catalyst that started it for us, because it was assistance with technical assistance for renewables, which we didn't have before. We didn't have a clear understanding of how to manage that risk as a bank. So we need more of that, because if we are unsure about something, but we can partner with somebody, or we can share knowledge, share resources, not just finance resources, but skills resources, it definitely assists. I think we've got other initiatives happening in Namibia outside of climate finance, whether it's with the development for SMEs. I know the Development Bank have got a project underway to assist the SMEs. We have, together with the Central Bank. So it's those type of financing initiatives that will help us go further, because no one bank or one industry can do it alone. So within the financial sector, it's not just the banks, it's the asset managers, it's the pension funds. We all need to participate. So as much as a bank will issue a bond, perhaps the asset managers buy that bond. And then they hold us accountable, because we've said it's a green bond, and they want to know that we definitely allocated those funds towards the projects that we said we would in terms of our framework. And I think that's the important parts.
Thank you very much, Claire. Alka, back to you. Considering multilateral development entities play a crucial role in mobilizing climate finance, how can these institutions enhance collaboration and alignment with other climate finance mechanisms to create a more coherent and efficient climate finance landscape?
So again, I would actually look at it very differently. Yes, there is collaboration happening, or discussions, consultations happening at the regional and the global level. But the actual thing, when you break it down or when you bring it down, should happen at the country level. It is for the country to actually articulate that need that is there. We've been talking about some figures that we need in terms of maybe green hydrogen, or even meeting the sustainable development goals, which is in the trillions of dollars. So that's why I'm again referring back why there was a need to bring together the INFF precisely to do this coordination, to have a coordinated approach to see that these are, because how do we do it? We map out the financing flows. What are the financing flows? What are you receiving from these multilateral financing institutions? The Green Climate Fund, the Global Environment Facility, then there is a World Bank dispensation as well, and there are other sources of these vertical funds, as we call them, from the international arena. But how do they now come into the country? How are they aligned? How is a coordinated and a coherent approach being taken to address climate change issues, which we talked about in the earlier session in terms of the mitigation adaptations? We have our nationally determined contributions, which Namibia has actually upped its ambition on. And these are across the various sectors, be it agriculture, forestry, tourism, and you name it, So these are the ones where this then falls on the country to basically coordinate. These are these funding windows. You can tap into them as a country, as a government, and even as private sector coming together in public-private partnerships. That's why it's very important that the industry, the private sector, plays a very important role And at the receiving end, obviously, of the climate change is the communities themselves. So what role can the communities play? What is the role of citizens? And there are enough instruments that are out there. But that is where we need to start. Somewhere we need to start by creating an awareness, an understanding, and then the action in terms of the coordination.
Absolutely. Clay, climate finance flows may sometimes lack predictability, and this can hinder long-term planning for climate projects. How can we address the challenge and promote predictable and sustained climate finance?
That's a bit of a difficult question. I think to the extent that we, for example, raised our sustainability bond, it was very easy for us to allocate our green bond financing because it was small, it wasn't a large volume, and it was specifically for green. So there were lots of renewable projects out there at that point in time, so it was very easy. With the sustainability bond, we tried to widen that to encompass environment and social and other aspects and not just the green and the renewables. And we found it now more difficult because we are trying to diversify. So as much as there are still lots of projects coming our way for solar and renewables, given what's happening across the border in South Africa, we are trying to make sure that we diversify that portfolio and we do stick with what we wanted in terms of giving a little bit more of an impact to the environment, societal, gender, equality, SMEs, and so on. And that is proving difficult because we could allocate it all very quickly, but that is not our intention. We want to make it a diversified portfolio. So it is not easy. And you have got a lot of funders coming your way and saying, we want to provide you with funding, but it must go towards this, this, and this. And if you don't have that specific pipeline and you don't have specific bankable projects that you can say it's going to be a successful project or they're going to start within the next year or two, we can't be allocating funding now for projects that are only going to start in 5 years. We need to use that money now. Money is expensive. You've got the funders giving you the funds, you've got investors giving you their assets, and you need to be able to give them a return on that. So you can't say, you're only going to get your return in 2 years' time when the project starts running. So we need to be able to motivate and justify that what we've said we're going to do, and immediately. We can't be holding those funds back and not utilizing them as we said we want to.
Fair enough. Alka, back to you. And with this particular question, I would like us to focus not so much on developing countries as a broad term, but particularly Namibia. And countries that are developing, such as ours, often express concerns about the complexity of accessing climate finance. What steps can be taken to simplify these procedures and to streamline processes for countries such as Namibia that seek climate finance support?
In most cases, and okay, let's speak of Namibia. And I think Namibia is, in my view, one of the good examples in terms of accessing climate finance. So as a country, we are doing quite well in terms of accessing climate finance. So we are recipients in terms of these international climate windows, vertical windows from the Global Environment Facility. And it's not now, it's been going on for several years. As we speak, we have several GEF projects running under the stewardship of the Ministry of Environment and Forests. So in fact, Namibia has quite an enviable track record, if I may say so, in terms of mobilizing funding. But now the question is, how far should we just rely on this? And by the way, the procedures are pretty well laid out. They are quite transparent, and they are not very difficult in terms of, at least in terms of these vertical funding windows to access. The host organization today, the Green EIF, is an accredited entity in terms of accessing Green Climate Fund, for instance. Yes, the value up to which they can access is small, But if they team up with organizations such as ours, I mean, that limit can be enhanced manyfold. So these are some of those little things that can be done that are within our ambit and our control that we can actually do. So those procedures coming from the multilateral financing institutions, they are pretty well laid out and clear. They are not very difficult in terms of accessing. But what we now need to do is to also diversify. We need to diversify this basis for climate financing. And that's where I think where the private sector, and I think again here, Namibia is one of the few countries which has, from the private sector, issued these bonds, the green bonds and the sustainability bond as was being mentioned. Now there is also a lot of possibility in terms of issuing blue bonds, right? For the, because of the ocean and all of the blue economy policy that we have. So there is a lot of untapped potential still where we can diversify. Then there are issues about other innovative finance mechanisms like blended finance facilities, you know. So you can do a lot of this work. A lot of other developing countries like Indonesia, Philippines, etc. They've done a lot. Gabon in West Africa, they've done a lot in terms of the green bonds, the taxation, those kind of issues, the green taxonomies. There are various instruments and products which are out there to which we can diversify, and we can still do a lot in Namibia on that.
Thank you very much, Alka. And to you, Clay, climate finance architecture must be responsive to evolving climate challenges. How can we build flexibility into the architecture to adapt to changing circumstances and emerging climate priorities?
Okay, so I think, again, it just goes down to working with others and being aware of what's happening. So, you know, we might think in Namibia we're not part of, you know, the bigger economy, but I think as long as we keep our hand on the pulse of what's happening in the rest of the world and take lessons from that and see what works and what doesn't work, so that to the extent that, you know, sustainable agriculture is very important for Namibia. Water is a key resource for us, and it's something that we really need to work on, you know, how are we going to solve it? We can't create rain, so what are we going to do? So I think we need to look around and say, specific for Namibia, what are the things that we need to focus on and not try to focus on everything. You know, maybe something that's working in France is not something that is needed in Namibia. So we need to be very specific to what our country needs, what we need to do, the size of our institutions. You know, our banks are small in comparison. Yes, there are 3 banks in Namibia that are, you know, their parents are South African banks or they're global banks, and Bank Windhoek is a smaller bank. But how do we then work together with, you know, the Development Bank or with the EIF or with government? And decide what it is that we need to do for Namibia and not try to do things that other people are doing. So if, for example, blue bonds is something that we need to do, then that is what we must look at and work towards it. But we mustn't just be doing things because it's you know, it's going to win us a prize and that's it. We must be doing it for the right reasons, and as a bank we need to be accountable to our depositors, to our regulator, to our other stakeholders, and of course to the communities and our own clients.
Now, the next questions that I do have were selected for our other panelists. However, I do believe with your expertise, you will be able to answer them for us. This one particularly open to the both of you. And it's really about climate financing having the potential to drive transformative change. Now, how can we ensure that climate finance efforts prioritize projects that have the greatest potential for sustainable and effective or impactful outcomes?
At the risk of sounding repetitive, but I think it's very important and even if I'm belaboring this point, it all starts from here. It all starts at the country level. It all starts from your planning and financing process at home. how do you, I mean, and let's stop looking at sectors in as watertight compartments, right? So if you are talking about the agriculture sector, for instance, that is the one sector that bears the brunt of climate change. What are the policies or financing mechanisms that we have in the agriculture sector? How are they impacting on, or how are they addressing the adaptation and mitigation aspects of climate change? Equally, relatedly, is the trade sector, your foreign trade or your trade with across the border, and related to that is the logistics, the transportation sector, energy, which we were talking about now. So you have to have a macro view in terms of the planning process, how you align your financing with your planning and your budgeting, and that's where you can actually see that we are starting to make an impact. There is also an element of co-financing which comes in across sectors. So it's not that the climate change is only the business of the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism. Agriculture is equally involved, energy is equally involved, transport is equally involved, trade is equally involved in it. So it has to be across. So you cut across, these are very fundamental issues which are impacting all our lives. So even as I said, mentioned earlier, it has to go down to the decentralized level, at the regional council level, how they plan, how they implement, how they are doing their budgets. So that's how we need to look at this issue in terms of financing.
Claire, from your perspective as a member of the private sector, in your view, what are the key strengths and weaknesses of the current global climate finance architecture? And how can we best leverage the strengths and perhaps address the weaknesses to better support climate action in vulnerable regions?
So I think that it's about being accountable and ensuring that, when we say we're going to do something, that we do it. So, for example, if on Bank Windhoek's side, we would issue our impact report to say, this is the impact that we made by financing these projects. The same with our sustainability bond, to make sure that people are aware of what is happening out there. And I think when we're looking at the frameworks, some people are concerned. There's the term that goes around greenwashing, which is, you say you're raising the funding for a certain purpose, but you are not. So I think as with any other banking regulation or financial regulation, they evolve and they change, and you must keep up to date with that, and you must be aware of what are the loopholes, what are the things that are not working, how can we do this better. And the same as with our framework and with our government's framework and with the policies that need to be approved and passed at Cabinet, we need to make sure that we update them regularly, and that we don't have acts and regulations that are outdated, that we keep abreast of what is happening. And this is a very, very fast-moving topic. It's changing daily, and we can't say that what we did in 2018 when we issued our first green bond is relevant today. We need to be evolving with it. And I think that's the important part, that we need to educate our the people that we employ now at the bank or within the businesses must have different skills and must have knowledge of climate change and what are the climate finance, as opposed to where before you would just, ask for somebody with an economics degree. I think it's a diverse role, and you won't just have one qualification, you will have to have multiple qualifications to ensure that you are kept abreast. And I think attending events like this, attending global conferences, networking with people, listening in this day and age, you don't have to physically attend something. There's so much that you can do online. And I think it's important for all of us to just keep abreast and upskill ourselves all the time and be aware of what's happening, and listen to others. And, when we engage with people from, different sectors, that we understand what they are doing and what we can be doing better, and not say that, we've done it perfectly. There's always room to change and improve. So I think that's the critical part, that we as Namibia must just understand what's happening in the rest of the world and take what can work for us, not try to take everything, but take what can work for us. And, we could actually come up with something, a new initiative and be a pioneer in some new form of financing. It's not to say that it can't happen and it can't come out of this part of the world just because we are a smaller country.
And the next question that I have is for the both of you. Perhaps, Alka, you can start, and Claire, you can add on. And it really has to do with reference to the earlier point you made about diversifying projects. And my question then is, what mechanisms have been put in place to ensure that we avoid the duplication of climate finance projects?
Currently in Namibia, I think for the climate finance issues, there's just one ministry responsible, which is the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism. So they are the custodians, and I think it's at that point that there is obviously due diligence done in terms of removing duplication. But there are other recipients as well, which is the Ministry of Fisheries, for instance, then the Ministry of Agriculture as well. So that is where the coordination needs to happen. And this is precisely one of the reasons that it is so important for the country to have to quickly establish the INFF, the Integrated National Financing Framework, so that brings in that whole transparency, accountability, and in terms of monitoring these financing flows.
Claire, anything to add?
I think just from our side, some of the projects are huge. And as I said, the banks aren't large enough to necessarily finance one project on their own. So sometimes you will find that more than one institution has put funding towards a project because it is so large. And it might be a local institution, or it might be that we've syndicated with some offshore institutions. But I think it is important, for example, when we look at the agricultural sector, that we don't just look at one aspect of it, and that we make sure that, we look at across not just the ones that are working, not just cattle, not just, fishing, but what are the new technologies that are coming out there? And that we make sure that we are abreast of those. So if somebody wants to start using drones in Namibia, do we understand what that means? And that we look at those little new technologies as well, and not just say, well, we've always only ever financed this part of agriculture, that's what we're sticking with. So we need to make sure that we are there are lots of young entrepreneurs, there are lots of SMEs, there are lots of people who want to start businesses. And I know everybody always asks, but how do I start? So I think it's an education process, and for the banks as well, to educate and make people understand what is it that we are prepared to finance, and why are we prepared to finance that? What makes it viable? And if yours is not viable, what do you need to do to change that to make it viable? And so then you will get a diversified portfolio of projects, and you won't be concentrating all your funding into one sector, because that's the sector that's working and that's the sector that's bankable. We must find out how do we make other sectors and other projects bankable as well, either via training or assistance, or ensuring that they have access to the knowledge that they need.
Fair enough. Before I open the floor for any questions, and unlike Denver, I do promise to allow more than 4 questions. So if you would like to ask a question, please just by indication of hand, and we will be sure that a microphone is brought to you. Now, while, of course, our conference attendees are preparing to ask questions, perhaps, Alka, you can just touch on the time limit, or not time limit, but perhaps Namibia's readiness to implement the INFF. How far are we with regards to that?
I think we are nearly there. So, in fact, UNDP has been, and the UN system at large, under the technical leadership of UNDP, has been supporting the government, particularly the Ministry of Finance and the National Planning Commission, to set up the INFF. As I mentioned at the outset, we are just at the verge of finalizing the integrated financing strategy for the country, which is actually predicated on all the 3 dimensions of sustainability, and also to support the implementation of the national development plans. So we are very much close to wrapping up this, but it's going to be an ongoing process because there is still a lot of work which requires to be done even in terms of the taxation system, the tax reform, and the SDGs. So there are little pieces of work which are already going on, but the INFF is a framework which has 3 or 4 building blocks. The diagnostic phase, which has been completed. Next is this financing strategy, which is also almost complete. And then we have the monitoring and reporting and the governance structure, which would, and these are some of the things which would be subject to stakeholder consultations, including with the private sector. So this is, I can confidently say that before the end of the year, this should be up and running.
That is fantastic news. Ladies and gentlemen, Claire, Alka, thank you so much for being so informative and helpful, even though the rest of our male participants on the panel have decided to evade us. But as always, women will save the day. Now, it seems that only men have questions, which is not surprising. But if we could please have a microphone here. We'll start with the gentleman in the front or the gentleman at the back, and then the gentleman there, and then, yes, our lady over there is number 3. Please just state your name, the organization that you represent, and then who you're directing your question to.
My name is Harald Schütt, and I have many hats on. Now I put the head of Amusha Consultancy Services. The question first and the explanation why I'm asking it afterwards. The question first is, are you really sure, and everybody else, ask yourselves, are you really sure that we need all this foreign money to become a sustainable country in terms of economy? Foreign money is a mortgage that we put on the shoulders of our children because they're going to pay for it in the long term. Let me give you one example. I'm here with my electrical car, and I'm creating the electricity to charge my batteries from my own roof with my own solar system. So when I see a petrol station, I do like, I just don't care. If I would buy the electricity to charge the batteries of my car, it would cost me between 20 and 25 Namibian cents per kilometer. I also have a combustion car. If I drive the same kilometer with that combustion car, it costs me $2.50 for petrol alone, the same kilometer. Running cost for the combustion car is about $5.50. Running cost for the electrical car is below $1. So let's make it simple. I can save $4 per kilometer that I'm driving. Meaning, if I drive 100 kilometers, I save $400. If I drive 1,000 kilometers, I save $4,000. So why do we not solarize and electrify the transport between Windhoek and Ushakati, for example? Same transport, same people, everything is the same. We just stop importing liquid fuels to a value of 10.6 billion Namibian dollars per year. We just try to reduce that figure. Would not those savings that we could make be enough? There's another 2.6 billion every year that we are using to import ready-made electricity from SAPP. Why don't we replace those 2.6 billion and then use them as our own money to invest instead of taking a credit from whichever German or international organization and pay interest for it?
Thank you very much. The next question, please. I think I'll take 2 questions at a time, and then once they're answered, we'll move over to the next batch.
All right, thank you very much. Mine is basically on access, the green bonds. Earlier, one of the guests from Bank Windhoek was also here talking about the green bonds and how Bank Windhoek is leading it, but I didn't get a chance to ask the question. So every time, and Ilka also spoke about it last time at the climate summit, that we're giving young people access excess, young people have excess, which is a keyword, excess. Now when we look at excess, that's okay, fine, we are 5 young people, we are putting up a plant, a culture plant, a farm, a green farm in Okahau. When we come to Bamben, look, we need a loan to put up a solar plant, probably 5 big plants to power the farm. The bank said, no, young people, please give me $2 million collateral. As now but then, first of all, I'm just a young person. I've experienced, because I've been on the communal land all my life, so I've experienced in terms of planting and harvesting. 2, I further experience in terms of I'm a graduate of agriculture, for example. So I know, so I have the hands-on experience and also the knowledge thereof. But still, I'm still asked to give a 10% collateral. I'm still asked to give $1 million collateral. But then at the end of the day, we come to conferences like this, say young people have access, when we don't have access at all. So are we able to redefine, perhaps maybe find other alternatives to ensure that young people, when young people come and try and get access to those blue bonds, they actually get them at the end of the day. Because it's good that we are here, because seemingly it's just meant for big corporates. But we young people of this country are the current drivers of our economy, should be the actual drivers. And investment should be prioritized to them. So just want to find out, is there alternatives thereof, beyond collateral and other stuff? Are there other means where young people need to, in terms of maybe my skill set could be a backup, because it needs to be backed by something. Yeah.
Thank you very much, George. Ladies and gentlemen, I know I said that I wouldn't cut anyone, but please try to keep your questions a bit shorter. Now, there were 2 questions asked, and I think, Alka, the first was for you, and it really had to do with whether or not we're sure we actually need all of this foreign funding in order to be sustainable in the global climate finance area. And then to Claire, with regards to the access to green bonds by the youth who may have interest in going into the green space but don't necessarily have the required collateral at the beginning. How does the private sector then meet the youth halfway to ensure that accessibility to green bonds is actually accessibility? Alka, we'll start with you.
Short answer, no. You don't need all of the foreign funding. Nothing like being self-reliant, because that is the only sustainable option. Always. But when you do have access, again that A word, access, and when it is not coming at a cost, by all means, go for it. Right? And that is exactly what the country is doing. They are accessing this at no cost. The GEF, the Green Climate Fund, yes, there is in some cases, not in all cases, there could be an element of co-financing, which is good, I think, which is important. And you gave a good example in terms of EVs. In fact, that is the next thing that we are actually planning on. In 2019, UNDP actually brought forward we still are using them precisely. Yeah, so we did those 2 electric vehicles, and we did the vehicle grid integration. So we have solar, we actually put solar panels on the UN house in 2017. From there, then in 2019, we adopted this technology of the vehicle grid integration for charging. So they became the charging stations for these electric vehicles. So that is the other element, and we wanted to upscale it. We've reached out to city of Windhoek, for instance, to the others, and even now to the Ministry of Health. We are working with them on solar for health, how we can bring in renewable energy into the health sector. We've done 11 clinics, so that their reliance, and particularly those which are completely off-grid, so they do have access to power. So that is the way to do. And even in a country like this, where you have 300 days of sun, it's a no-brainer. Why should we be going any other route? Why should we be importing so much power when we need to be self-reliant? So yes, definitely, and this is the way we go. In fact, just before coming up, I was speaking with the ED, he has left. I said, we are very late in going on the renewable energy route. We should have done it much earlier. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Alka. Yes, Claire, over to you.
Okay, so the question that was asked now, I think gets asked at every single conference that I've been to so far. Why do young people need collateral? It's not only young people who need collateral, it's old people like me too. So it's not that we don't want to give you 100% loan, but you must remember it's not our money that we are giving you, it is our depositors' money. So we are a regulated institution. We need to abide by the regulations of our central bank. And, if we were to give 100% loan to everybody, what are the probabilities of some of those defaulting? And I understand you might have the education and you might have the skill, but have you ever managed a large project before, for example? So do you have the financial skill? And that's where the bank comes in and helps with, education and understanding. Do you understand how to manage a business? Which is critical. You might understand how to farm, but that farm now becomes a business. So do you understand how to manage it? Are you selling your product in the right place? What are your transport costs, for example? Could you be cutting those down by using electric vehicles instead of petrol powered vehicles? So I think it's a package thing. It's not just, I have this idea, please give me the money for it. As our MD always says, we also expect sometimes to put some of your own skin in the game. So how much are you putting down? How committed are you to this? Have you been able to save a bit to put towards this project, or do you just want the bank to give you all the money? As soon as you're prepared to put a bit of your own skin in the game, or your family is prepared to put a bit of skin in the game, or you have another investor who says, I will put equity into this. It's not you alone, but there's 5 of you. I will be the equity investor. Here's my 100,000 that I'm putting. Go and borrow 900,000 from the bank, and then we will do this as a business. I think that just makes it more viable for the bank. So we're not trying to turn you away because we don't want you to do business. We don't want you to be a success, but we also don't want you to lose money and then become a bad debt for the bank, or that we now have to explain why to our depositors why we have lost a portion of their money because we wanted to help this young man with his farm. So I think you always need to look at both sides, but to the extent that we are able to help you, and if it's something that is, your business plan doesn't make sense or whatever, we will definitely guide you with that. But sometimes it is also about just putting some of your own money down, or finding an investor. So even in a business, you have so much debt and so much equity. Even as a bank, we are not funded purely on debt. So, we have to, in any business, understand that there is that mix.
Thank you very much. I do believe we have more questions. Yes, we have one more question over here.
Yes, I just wanted to understand from, my name is Michelle Helonga, I'm from Minister of Mines. From Bank Windhoek, your colleague earlier mentioned that you guys are trying to get accreditation to get funding from the Green Climate Fund. So in the terms of EIF, my understanding is that money is largely given out as grants to the recipients. So I just wanted to understand from the bank's perspective, what does that look like?
Okay, so we haven't received accreditation yet. Joachim is still hard at work. There's lots of documents that you have to submit. So for us, it's more about, so if we get that grant funding, what will we do with it? Will it allow us to perhaps reduce the interest rate that we charge on loans, qualifying loans? Will it allow us to employ 1 or 2 resources that will help upskill us on the type of funding that we're doing, or the type of projects that we are funding? Or will it assist us in educating our clients in terms of, what business they could be doing and how they could be improving themselves? So I think it's a matter of when you get that funding that you use it towards. So we would have to give them a concept note and say, this is what we would be using it towards. So is it something that we as Bank Windhoek want to do more in the gender space? I mean, our MD is a female. We have a business in women product. We are trying to do more for women. So perhaps it's something towards, how do we allow for the female in agriculture? They're already doing a lot in that sector. So what can we be doing more for women in agriculture? So would it be, how do we apply that grant funding that we get? And we need to be able to motivate what we would do for it. It wouldn't be funding that the bank gets for free and then we can just use it however we want. There definitely needs to be accountability for what we would do, and we have to explain to them why we would want that funding and how we would apply it. And definitely it's the more that you are putting it towards education or building capacity or skills, it will definitely help towards us being receiving any funding going forward.
All right. Thank you very much, Claire. We have 2 more questions.
This is the last one. I'm Abia from Treaties. I just wanted to ask the bank, now, let's say you got this funding. Are you going now to have also an option for giving us grants? Because since the environmental fund gives us grants, and they also have a part where we have loans. And then I also wanted to ask, you indicated saying that, no, we need to also fund different ideas. Now, us who we come with agricultural smart ideas using different technologies, how would you fund me if I come with that idea? Yes, I do have a little bit of money, but the idea costs a lot. Because I just want to hear about that, because if you want the fund, we want to know if we are also benefiting.
Moderator, let me quickly take the liberty. Carl Aribeb from the EIF, working very closely with GCF accreditation. There are two different accreditation streams. EIF is accredited for own granting under mitigation and adaptation department. Bank Windhoek is pursuing accreditation under the private sector facility for own lending, okay, and maybe also blended financing. So a small percentage for granting to de-risk, but primarily for own lending. So same source of funding, but not quite the same.
Thank you. So a bank is not there to give grant funding. We are a listed company, we have depositors, we are not there to just give out funding. So that's why any grant funding we get will be to assist in de-risking or to educating our clients and spread it across, not give it to one client who's got a big idea with a big project but a small amount of cash. We also obviously do our own corporate social investing. So in terms of that, we're very active there under the Capricorn Foundation. So there are lots of other ways that we give back to the communities and so on. It's not only in lending. So to also be giving out grant funding is not our business model. It is not what we do. So no, we would not be doing it, but as has been explained, what we would do with any funding and how we would ensure that everybody gets an equal chance at receiving a loan for a good idea.
Thank you very much, Claire. I think following the spirit of Denver's modus operandi, when he took over a lot of our own time, I think I can selfishly steal a last 10 minutes before we do conclude. There was a last question by this lovely lady in front of me here, and then we'll move over to our concluding thoughts. Ricardo, I pray for strength for you, but we are almost done.
My name is Eveline. I work for no one. I represent the youth. Now, today was relatively great. I got an opportunity to network with individuals, etc. But as someone who had to struggle to even just come here, who has to struggle to even just get data, to even just watch this, I'm curious, when you say you're going to offer us skills, when I have to pay for that, is there a way for me to get past that barrier of having to now pay to learn a certain skill? Do you guys give funding to people that want to be educated about conducting business, just to learn the skill in general, not to get the loan to do the business? We'll get to that part a bit later, but to just learn the skill. Are there mechanisms that provide funding to those individuals? And I'm not talking about NASFAF, because that's an entirely different institution for an entirely different kind of education. But for this education in business, these general skills like networking and learning how to organize and arrange your finances of your business, etc., what mechanisms exist there for people like me who want to learn but can't afford to pay for those services?
Okay, so definitely the skills we're going to want to teach you are financial skills. Okay, and that's as much as we can help you with. And we do run from our iLounge, for example, under our SME department and our team there. We do run sessions where we advertise. We've had, as I said, we've partnered with NIPBD, we've partnered with Development Bank, various institutions, and I think all the banks have done it, where they've had networking sessions of a day or two, where they call on the youth, please come and attend. It is advertised on social media, because we know you guys don't read the newspaper, so it's on social media, and just look out for those opportunities and say that you want to know more. And if after that there's still more that you want to know, then definitely approach us, and we can, if we can't assist you, we can at least direct you as to where you can. But we're not going to teach you skills that are not related to financials, or how to improve your business case, or how to make your project more viable, or something like that. It will definitely be out of the financial industry, and that is definitely where we can assist you at any point in time.
Thank you very much to all those who've asked questions. Thank you to everyone for being attentive. I know it's very late in the afternoon, but you've all been so stellar, and for that you deserve a round of applause, yeah? As well as Claire and Alka, thank you so much for being eager to be part of our panel discussion and for imparting your knowledge with us. I'm sure that you have done the panel discussion justice. Even though we are missing 3 other members, with the 2 of you, it's as if all 5 were present. Let's give them a round of applause, please. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this panel discussion. I will now hand over to the program director to take charge of the remaining part of the program, and then bid you all farewell. Thank you.
It's a land of pride and dignity. Namibia, we love thee. It's a land of diversity. That's where we want to be. Namibia, little land. Namibia, little land.
Welcome to Green Hydrogen Village Phase 1. The 4 phase houses. And other side there, you can see we are also busy with the training center and the laboratory. And on the other side, you can see the grader is busy now with platform for greenhouse and for electrolyzer.
The treatment consists of a water treatment plant that provides water for potable use, agriculture, and for hydrogen production. The raw water comes from boreholes that are here on site. There's about 70 cubes of water being produced for the agriculture, 10 for potable use, and 10 cubes for hydrogen production a day. We have done some borehole testing, and there is sufficient water for this first phase of the project, the pilot project. And yeah, so we'll be treating the water using reverse osmosis technology because it is quite high in TDS, so dissolved salts. And then after that, for the hydrogen production, we'll be using an ultra pure water production step, something like demineralization, which will utilize continuous electro-deionization. And all of this will be powered by renewable energy.
Hi, I'm Mario Kenkop. I'm originally from EIF. It's a great honor to represent the Dongore's Green Hydrogen Project. I'm employed by Nexus as a general worker, and this means a lot to me.
This is a great opportunity and a life-changing opportunity. I'm very much grateful for the Dongore's Green Hydrogen Village, as I'm not employed and I can contribute to my family.
Broadcast is brought to you by the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia. The United Nations Development Programme, together with the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade and their partners, the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia and Standard Bank Namibia, launched the Sustainable Development Goals Impact Facility on Monday, the 2nd of November 2020. The SDGIF will be used to provide mentorship grants and debt financing to women and youth in business, social enterprises, and micro, small, and medium enterprises. Fulfilling the promise of the UN Sustainable Development Goals requires multi-sectoral approaches that bring together expertise from a range of perspectives.
The SDGIF, which is the short form for the Sustainable Development Goals Investment Facility. So it was deliberately titled like that because the idea was to put together a financing platform or financing vehicle that, and this facility was targeted at micro, small, medium enterprises or MSMEs who are working in these areas in terms of creating employment, even doing their entrepreneurship in the areas of sustainable development goals.
So the Sustainable Development Impact Facility, or the SDGIF, is a women and youth-based match grant facility. The facility is a partnership between the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade, the UNDP, Standard Bank Namibia, and the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia. The facility funded businesses across 3 windows.
Definitely, there's need for funding for SMEs, for women, for the youth, for...
Thank you very much. I would have actually wanted to finish up the video, but I understand that some people still need to go home and change for the program later in the evening. But nonetheless, I think as part of the parting shots, there's deliberately no vote of thanks on the program because we still have a program in the evening tonight, particularly for the grantees that are here. I think, but all I can say for now, as we're coming to the end of the stakeholder conference, I think really there's quite a number of important or salient points that were brought up. The first session, in terms of the NDC contributions that we need to make, we know that it's quite expensive. Over 80 billion Namibian dollars is what we are expecting in as far as money that we must raise to meet some of those targets. If you ask some of the peers, they'll of course tell you that as a country, Namibia we don't really contribute anything to the carbon emissions. I think it's, Mr. Harold would agree, I think it's 0.001% or something like that. But nonetheless, because of our international obligations, we have to adhere and see what measures we can put in place. And I think that ties in quite closely with the renewable energy efforts that we're trying to put in for green hydrogen. So in terms of the multilateral, the first session, I think the key takeaway really there is we have to tighten up some of the partnerships that we have, of course, with the private sector as well. If we have to meet some of the NDCs, we know that it will not be government alone that can do that. And some of the players in the industry have been preaching the choir since time immemorial. I think the public-private partnership session, the second one, is a straightforward one. The act is there. There are still certain areas that we need to tighten up, particularly with the Environmental Investment Fund that works with international funders and financing. There are different requirements, of course, from a global perspective in terms of how we use some of these monies. But tonight we're going to be seeing the work of this public-private partnership come into play, because it's not the government of Namibia that put together this $88 million that we're going to give away tonight by itself. But there are, of course, contributions from the international development community. I think the president always says that we are a child of international solidarity as a country. And we have seen that over the last 33 years, of course, come alive. But there can be so much money given, but if it's not implemented effectively, it is basically at the end of the day, we are wasting it. And there is, in terms of the partnership, one of the strongest points that of course came out was also the issue around involving youth. And I've been having some sideline conversations with the executives from the Environmental Investment Fund, and they are looking into a possibility of having a similar large-scale consultation that is just focused with young people. So the honorable governors and everybody above 35 will not be here. Some of us qualify as upper youth, so we'll still we'll try to find a way. So the event organizer, please let us in. But nonetheless, the most important one we took away from that one, of course, is to make sure how do we bring young people on board. I think generally for most of us sitting in the room, we understand the problems, we understand the issues, but in the next 5 years, there is not going to be a Harold Schutz that will be on our case for renewable energy, or, there will not be a John Mukwame that will be forcing us to do certain things a certain way, involve more communities. So it's important for us to make sure that we empower young people going forward, but that empowerment cannot be lip service. It really has to be where they sit down and become part of the decision-making process. And we see that happening throughout the rest of the strata within the country, of course. The council, when you have the likes of George Kambala sitting on the Windhoek, on the city council, that is not a small feat. It's not something we could have thought of 10 years ago or so. So young people are making inroads in different strata in our society. It's a matter of making sure that we create spaces for them to be able to express themselves and be part of the future that they are designing for themselves. The green hydrogen session is a very, very important one. It's a narrative that will continue for quite some time. I had mentioned a bit earlier on yesterday, Hyphen, who is, of course, the one that won the preferred bidder status for the feasibility study. Remember, they are just doing the feasibility for the industry. They're not the ones that are doing business now alone outside of everybody else. I know FFI from Australia is also doing work. There's a number of big companies that are in the country right now that are doing work in that space as well. But I think the big takeaway from this one is how do we position ourselves? And again, there is the issue around young people. I know Hyphen is doing part of their socio-economic development framework, which the launch at Ketmans yesterday was saying that, look, we have 15,000 jobs, 3,000 doing for permanently and 12,000 during the construction phase. And out of those, 90% are supposed to be Namibians. And this is a new industry. We know, I think, about 97 have been sent for postgraduate studies, financed by SASCAL and the Office of the President. About 97, so they will be qualified in master's, PhD, in chemistry, and a number of other fields that are related to green hydrogen. But the key point here is, and I think that's also the appeal I want to make to everybody sitting in the room here, is that we recognize that you're leaders in different spaces that you're finding yourselves in. It's important for us in the room to understand the potential of green hydrogen, but also be realistic about, like some of the questions that came in, the time that it will take to have tangible benefits. But right now, there are some immediate takeaways. Employment opportunities, opportunities for procurement in terms of support services. I know there's an oil and gas conference coming up in August 16th and 17th here in Windhoek. But of course, also, if you could just look at support services, we're looking at over 7 billion Namibian dollars. So it's one thing for us to say we want jobs, but it's another thing to also say, how can I create a business entity that will be able to tap into the support services that will be available? Transport, car rentals, you name it, cleaning services, security, etc., etc. So there's a number of support services that come with the green hydrogen industry that we can immediately start benefiting from, even in the feasibility stage. It's a matter of how do we position ourselves. Of course, all of these details we'll include in the report. And I think finally, in terms of finance, there's not much I really want to say about this as well. We'll include all the details in a comprehensive report that will be shared with all the grantees and all the stakeholders that are present here as well. But one thing, of course, is that we know, in terms of financing, we can't do it alone as a country, but we have to, of course, also streamline. There's a lot that we're doing in different silos. We need to start speaking to each other to make sure that we provide, of course, that benefit for Namibians going forward. But all the details in as far as recommendations and the salient points that came up in the discussion, we will include in the report, and we'll share that with you as well. I know there's a number of stakeholder engagement platforms that the EIF has planned for the rest of the year, and that will be communicated through the communications team. But for you, you will receive the report to see what are the recommendations going forward for the Environmental Investment Fund. This was really more engagement to take internal stock and to see what are the gaps, where can we improve in terms of what we are doing. And the big one that really came out for today was youth, youth, youth. We're a country that has got over 63% young people that are now becoming economically active. So we need to have a plan for those people. Otherwise, everybody else will have a plan for us. Imagine the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is effective from the 1st of January, 2023. But Namibia is not exporting anything to the African countries yet under that agreement. But they already started, Ghana, Uganda, etc. So if we don't position ourselves, we'll have a situation where we'll be flooded with those goods. They will become the new Chinese. And so it's important for us to see, when this sort of engagement happens, how do we position young people, and how do we make sure they're able to take charge of this so that as we are growing as a nation, we are able to be in control of our destiny. I would also just like to recognize the exhibitors outside. I know that many of you sitting here, you have money. Please buy some stuff outside. There's detergents, I saw chili sauces, all sorts of organic stuff that are being produced. Make sure to make a turn by the exhibition. See what you can buy. I don't know, George, whether they give credit. Maybe we can speak to one of the guys. But I think that they take cash and e-wallets and all the other wallets that are available. So let's just support them. Even if you're not buying anything, pass by, appreciate what you're doing. Just inform yourself. Maybe you can come back in the future. Some of them have traveled 700-800 kilometers to be here in Windhoek to come and exhibit some of those products with you as well. So we'd really like to thank those. I'd just like to also extend a thank you from the EIF Secretariat to all the speakers that were present here for today. I know some of them left to go get dressed for later. I don't know who told them that there will be a red carpet, but we'll see. I just want to thank all the speakers. I think in terms of your presence, and I moderate a lot of conferences generally, and it's very few conferences where you see that there's such a large crowd that still remains at this time. Usually once we eat during lunch, you look for ways to escape. You told the office that you'll be at EIF, but after lunch, you're going to go run some errands, pay some bills, see your Kamboroto, stuff like that. But I don't want to accuse anybody. Development partners that were present, of course, the UNDP, a number of others. We know we work a lot with the UN agencies, GIZ, the European Union, the African Union, all those stakeholders, international institutions, development partners that were invited for today. We'd just like to extend our thanks. Private sector really has been present and responsive. I know The Donres Green Hydrogen Village was also one of those people that we really got in on the last minute, and they were very, very happy to come and become part of this process as well. Of course, one of those pilot projects. So we extend our thanks for making the effort to be here and even by sending their Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Jerome Namasep, to come and present here as well. Really, the whole idea behind green hydrogen and all of these new initiatives is to just see how we empower Namibians. Every day we are saying we don't have jobs. If something comes on the table, let's jump on it. Let's sustain some livelihoods for the next 4 or 5 years. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, right? But we have to strive, we have to start, but it requires the whole country to pull together to make some of these things work. On that end, thank you so much for making time out to be here. I just want to indicate that I know there's an EBA gala dinner. If you do not have an invitation, please make sure to try to get an invitation outside of the Secretariat staff. But all the EBA grantees and everybody that has received an invite, please do make sure that you're here. 7 o'clock sharp, we are starting. But before that, we'll have a short red carpet at 6:30. We want to see how good you look before we start with the event. It is really a celebration of the efforts and work that we put in collectively as a country. It's not easy to take out 88 million and to give away to communities at that level and say 88, that's what I'm saying, $88 million. It's not easy to give away money at that level and say, listen, we don't want you to pay it back. Make sure you just execute. That's the most important thing. Use it for the purpose intended. So on that note, until we celebrate today at 7 o'clock sharp, red carpet starting at 6:30. Thank you so much for making time out to join us. We will, of course, share the report going forward after this, I think 2 or 3 weeks from now. If there are any stakeholders that have not been invited to the EBA Gala, please just talk to the team in front so that we see how we accommodate you. On that note, thank you so much once again. Can we please stand so that we close the program with the national and African Union anthems, and of course, just pay respect to this beautiful land of the brave of ours. Thank you.
Let us all unite and celebrate together the victories won for our liberation. Let us dedicate ourselves to rise together to defend our liberty and unity. Oh, sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky, let us make Africa the tree of life. Namibia, land of the great freedom fight, we have won. Glory to their bravery, whose blood waters our freedom. We give our love and loyalty, together in unity, contrasting beautiful Namibia, Namibia, our country, beloved land of savannas, all under the banner of liberty. Namibia, our country, Namibia, motherland, we love thee.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Just as a parting shot, 2 things. Number 1, the Environmental Investment Fund is the best performing environmental investment fund on the continent. We have other Swatinis, etc. Thank you very much. Round of applause there. And finally, I think generally with this kind of stuff, we sometimes walk out and others will say, no, we are talking always. But it's a democracy. If we don't consult, we are not involving you. So we need to always talk to each other. Thank you so much. See you later.